All right. Good afternoon, everyone. We will now call the May 6, 2019 board meeting to order. Mr. Gaither, will you please call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Representing Educational District 1, Ms. Leslie Grant. Representing Educational District 3, Ms. Michelle Olympiades. Representing Educational District 5, Ms. Erica Mitchell. Representing Educational District 6 and Board Vice Chair, Ms. Isha Collins. Representing Educational District at Large Seat 9 and Board Chair, Mr. Jason Estevez.
Present.
Mr. Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gaither. I will now entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the April 8th board meeting.
So moved.
Been properly moved by Isha Collins. Is there a second?
Second.
Been seconded by Michelle Olympiades. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Is there a motion to approve the May 6th board meeting agenda? Been properly moved by Isha Collins. Is there a second?
Second.
Been seconded by Michelle Olympiades. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Dr. Christopherson, will you please bring the work session items?
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, everyone. I wanted to present 3 items today focused on our 2020 strategic plan. We'll begin with Sky Duckett. Welcome, our Chief Human Resources Officer, who'll update the board on our talent management strategy. It'll be followed by Larry Hoskins, the Operations Officer, who'll talk about the 2017 SPLOST budget and some proposed amendments. And then we'll conclude with Lisa Bracken, the Chief Financial Officer, who will do a couple of things: provide a systems and resource report on the fiscal year 2019 General Fund monthly financial update, an update on the quarterly student activity fund, as well as the tentative adoption for fiscal year 2020 budget. We also have some procurement initiatives related to access for minority and women-owned businesses that we want to give the board and the community an update on, and we'll close out leaving time for the board to ask questions related to anything as it relates to the food and nutrition contract. So I'll turn it over to Sky Duckett, who will start with talent management.
Superintendent Karstafen, and members of the board. Thank you for the opportunity to provide this annual update on the talent management portion of the strategic plan. The purpose of this presentation is to update the board on the work that has been done over the past year and plans for next year. By the end, you should have an understanding of how this work is continuing to have positive outcomes and the challenges that we still face. The talent management work began as one of 4 pillars of our 5-year strategic plan, as shown here. We strive to recruit and retain the best talent in APS and continually develop, recognize, and compensate our staff. The talent management strategy is a long-term, cross-functional partnership that's closely aligned with the other pillars of this strategic plan. As presented in April 2016 and May 2017, our theory of action remains the same. If we partner with schools to recruit, develop, and retain the best educators, and continually compensate them, then they will grow in their professional practice and consistently serve our students at a high level, so that you see here our students will graduate college and career ready. This is the visual representation of the talent management strategy that may look familiar to some of you. It's been updated a few times over the years. We go over it each May. As a reminder, this is a joint strategy between the schools and academics office and human resources. There are 3 primary objectives, which are to define the bar for excellence, attract, select, and onboard and support employees to reach the bar, and then reward, recognize, and retain those who meet and exceed expectations. To meet these objectives, we set out with 5 initiatives outlined here in the dark colored boxes and numbered that were focused on instructional staff. With the financial support you provided in the fiscal year 19 budget, we were able to make some investments to strengthen our talent systems in close alignment with our academic priorities. Today, I'll outline the progress that's been made in each of these initiatives and the next steps moving into the 1920 school year. So the foundation of our talent strategy has been creating clear definitions of excellence for APS teachers, assistant principals, and principals. These definitions were developed in partnership with teachers, our schools, communities, and other staff. They provide a common language for what excellent teaching and leading means in APS, and they've been used to inform teacher and leader selection this year, as well as onboarding, coaching, and rewards and recognitions. The work done this year was to clarify the language to make it more specific and useful to the academics team, and we led a series of sessions throughout the year to increase school leaders and teachers' understanding of the definitions. And so for each of these initiatives that I'm going to review with you, there's a corresponding slide in the appendix that has more detail that may explain some of the terminology or some data. Second initiative is around strengthening teacher recruitment and hiring. In our efforts to grow the pool of high-quality teachers and leaders choosing to apply to APS, we continued our second year of teacher recruitment ambassadors, which is where some of our top teachers help recruit other teachers and candidates. We also added to our residency pipeline programs, recruiting strategies for special education. In the first year of our partnership with Maple, we gained a lot of insight into the quality of data we were collecting on our new hires, and we made some changes to our online application as a result. Once you have a higher quality pool, you also have to conduct higher quality interviews. We still have the more rigorous district principal and assistant principal interview days that include things like performance tasks, data analysis, and role plays. The pre-screened principal candidates are then provided to go teams to interview when there's a principal vacancy. We applied the same concept this year to instructional coaches and created a pool for principals to choose from. Our satisfaction survey showed that principals feel the quality of candidates is increasing steadily every year. Then once we find great candidates, we're working very hard to ensure that they have a smooth, efficient hiring process and a welcoming and helpful onboarding experience. I have to thank our hard-working principals who really stepped up their efforts in early hiring this year and have already filled almost 400 vacancies. And this is a banner year for early hiring for us. Early hiring is critical because the best candidates go quickly during hiring season, and it sets our new teachers up for success by giving them more time to get prepared for the start of the school year. Also, we received great feedback from our extended summer orientation program for new teachers, their coaching and support plan for the first 90 days, and year-long mentoring for new leaders. For both new hires and existing teachers, we continued professional development opportunities, of which there are many, but new work related to teacher and leader professional development included more training on coaching skills, work with leadership teams on the concept of academic systems, which is the linkage between instructional planning, data-driven instruction, coaching, and professional learning in schools. Our aspiring leader programs are fortunately growing in both quantity and reputation. We developed 63 aspiring leaders this year. That's up from 45 last year. But we also worked with principals to be able to do similar work in their schools with their aspiring leaders because we are not able to reach them all at the district level. So we did some capacity building around that. The fifth and final initiative is to retain top performers and develop future leaders. And that includes a focused effort on developing the capacity of school leadership teams to get to know their teachers better and to individualize their development through a process called talent reviews. School leadership teams learned how to use all available data and their firsthand knowledge to calibrate on teacher performance and their potential in order to create higher quality development plans for them. One of the outputs of knowing their teachers better is that principals can identify the ones that are capable of, but also interested in leadership opportunities while still continuing to teach. We're actively working to continue to ensure that all teachers are well compensated for high quality performance and also when they go above and beyond in these leadership roles. The goal is to increase teachers' voice and decision-making power within the school, which is directly linked to improved retention and engagement. It's worth mentioning that school leaders and teachers are not doing this alone. There are district systems that are being improved in order to support these efforts and make it a less heavy lift. You may remember these were the gray bars at the bottom of that colored chart I showed you. The availability of useful data has improved, as well as easy-to-use toolkits, templates, videos, and libraries of resources to go along with the areas of growth that principals may identify in their data analysis. So, from this work, we're seeing some positive outcomes related to hiring and retention. A few of them are summarized here. To prepare for next year, we reflected on what we feel like are our current strengths and opportunities to guide our future focus. We've made a great deal of progress, but of course we always have a long way to go. We feel like we're holding high expectations for joining the team, investing in developing the leadership skills for both our teachers and leaders, And by replicating what works year over year, we're creating a stronger people-focused culture. To inform shifts in the strategy for next year, we conducted several feedback sessions with the Superintendent's Teacher Advisory Council and principals, in addition to data analysis and surveys. The areas we plan to focus on are listed here, and the corresponding initiatives that were supported and also some suggested by teachers and principals, as well as what we know to be research-based best practices. So therefore, the strategy for next year builds upon these emerging strengths by continuing what works and then shifting some other initiatives to address key gaps. We're really excited about creating recruitment marketing toolkits for schools to be able to personalize and use to direct market their schools, starting the development of a special ed teacher pathway program, which you may have heard me say in Budget Commission will rely heavily on stabilizing the turnover of our paraprofessionals in that area by making them full-time with benefits. A lot of effort will be placed on building the capacity of schools to better support and mentor their new teachers and providing an intentional focus on mental health resources and support for teachers. We're really excited about that. All of this will be in support of the academic systems framework that links together coaching support, data-driven instruction, and professional learning, keeping the focus of this strategy on teaching and learning and student outcomes. From here, we plan to move forward with these short-term next steps with some short-term next steps, preparing for the budget for next school year, preparing for summer leadership retreat, and working with principals over the summer to help them get prepared for the start of the school year. The slides in the appendix provide more detail about each of the initiatives that I discussed and some of the data that we commonly use as part of the strategy. While there's still much heavy lifting to do in this area, we feel like we have a path forward, and I am happy to answer any questions you may have or provide clarifying information at this time.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your time. Questions from the board? I have Leslie. Go with Leslie for now.
Thank you very much. I know there's a lot of information in that presentation. Looking in the appendix on slide 26. Yep, that one. So this is something that I've inquired about a couple of times. Can you just give me a little bit more understanding on this? The survey number of respondents on the survey is. So this is 1 year. Is there a comparative? Well, I guess it doesn't matter because different people are leaving at different times. What do you do with the stuff on the left once you get that? I mean, is there?
So they're actually, first of all, it was very, very hard to decide what to put regarding exit interviews because we slice and dice that information 100 different ways. So this is a very high level summary, and it's not exactly how we look at it, but it is very high level. But what we do with this is we use our exit interviews to guide both district level strategy and initiatives, and then also work with individual schools where we may spot some trends. We'll go in a little deeper in those schools with some of these initiatives. Mm-hmm. So we use it to inform both district level work and school level work. Like specifically, there aren't a lot of changes in trends significantly from year to year. Some of the things that they feel good about, they continue to feel good about. But it does guide, like, for example, some of the ones that continue to be lower are guidance and leadership provided by your supervisor, professional treatment. So you'll see a lot of work going on, and you may have heard from Angela, was it last month, Angela, on engagement? And the work that they're doing with principals to engage their teachers, that's part of this strategy. And the work we're doing around fast feedback, helpful feedback, talent reviews, coaching plans that are individual to teachers, leveraging them for leadership, all those things. We kind of look at what's low and make sure our strategies are addressing that. And we look at what's high and make sure we continue those things.
Okay. And just am I reading this right? There's, approximately 350 that exited last or 17, 18 year and that responded to this. There's
Yes.
others that
Correct.
may not have responded. Does that include teachers, I guess, who were maybe transferred over to partner schools?
Yes.
So they could
Yes.
be in this.
They could, potentially.
Yeah, okay.
Anyone who exited from our district
Okay.
would have received the email to complete the survey. So to actually transition to a partner school, they have to resign from APS
Yeah.
and then be hired. So they would have gotten the
That just explains the
survey.
number a little bit, yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's correct.
okay.
And that chart is only for teachers.
Uh-huh.
Instructional staff, I pulled out non-instructional staff.
Okay.
So the numbers are a little lower than our total number of separations. And we tend to have a really high response rate on our exit surveys. It's about 61%.
Mhm.
That's in about the 80th percentile compared to like urban districts.
Okay. And then the, on the right, that is not people who have exited the system, just ones who responded to the promoter. Would you recommend?
These are
Survey.
of the people exiting, the ones that responded to the
Okay.
promoter question and how they responded.
Okay.
And I think we've discussed this maybe at a past board meeting, but we look at exit interview data, but those are people who are leaving.
Mhm.
So it's not your leading indicator, but it's something you look at.
Sure.
So this, the number of promoters of people who are leaving the organization is increasing year over year.
Okay. I wasn't clear by the footnote if that was people who were on their way out. I know it's in that category, so.
Correct.
Okay, but you did, the number of respondents, again, just so I'm reading it clearly, 16, 17, there were 54, less than 54 respondents? And
That's
seven-
actually the change in the net promoters from that is the net promoter score.
Negative 54,
Yes. It's not great.
okay. Okay, but so the number of folks who are doing that is comparable,
Yeah, so
Okay.
63, in 17-18, 40% of the 350 would have answered that question on a range of 0 to 6. And 39% of the 350
Okay.
gave it a 7 or 8,
okay,
et cetera.
okay. And just to go back to the level of surveys and opportunities for feedback that you're getting from people. I know people get upset because they have too many things to fill out, feedback to give, but can you just a little bit of how much are you getting directly from the instructional staff?
Right, as far as surveys of
just
schools. So we do.
How are your ears tuned into them?
Yeah, so we, in addition to, I'll talk about the surveys. We also have about 50 teachers on teacher advisory that we engage with almost monthly during the school year, and we do surveys in there. And then we also started this year on a twice per year teacher survey that's specifically aligned to our talent strategies. Here it is, implemented biannual survey for teachers. And we got a really great, like 89% response rate from that, and a lot of positive feedback that they were being directly asked. So I at least feel like with that survey, they didn't feel like it was too much surveying, because
Right.
a lot of them filled it out, and that a lot of them consistently filled it out from fall to spring. So we have that information, and that's just given right back to principals to help inform these strategies in their school for next year. We also take the engagement data that Angela's shop collects, and we actually get Excel spreadsheet versions, heat mapped and slice and dice it a lot of ways. We get great retention data from the data and information group that we look at holistically, then we look at by school, by elementary, middle, high, high poverty, low poverty, information like that. We also survey new teachers specifically and cohort them, and that's part of their, work with the new teacher program. Existing teachers, new teachers, all teachers. Yeah, so Gallup engagement, retention data, surveying, teacher advisory committee, and then our new teacher survey that we implemented to kind of fill in some of the gaps.
Okay. And then back to sort of meta question in terms of needs and assessing the needs at particular schools and teachers' needs and how those are being moved around and matched up.
The needs of teachers at particular schools.
The needs of the students at particular schools and how how we are driving talent to meet the needs of the schools.
Right, exactly. So we've been working for a few years now. We look at it two ways. We work with our turnaround schools, and we have specific strategies for those. And then every year, as part of our Title II, like data analysis, and they look at it through an equity lens. We look at high poverty quartile, low poverty quartile. And then we also look at our schools that have high turnover and were hard to fill the year before. So there's 3 groups: turnaround schools, hard to fill, hard to staff schools, and the high poverty schools. Sometimes schools are in multiple categories. And then we really, when we're designing our recruitment strategies for the next year, we're really designing them for those schools with the intentionality of pushing the most experienced and highly qualified teachers to them, and them having the earliest access to the candidates. So for a few years now, we've been doing hiring incentives. We've also been having specific turnaround teacher interview days that are before other interview days. Those teacher recruitment ambassadors that work on recruiting for the District of 24, they're pretty highly concentrated in some of those schools that have the highest need, and they're funneling candidates right to those principals. And we've even noticed this year that our like turnaround schools and some of our schools that were traditionally hard to fill have been first to fill their vacancies. So we have several strategies to match recruiting to school need.
Okay, that's good to hear. Thank you very much.
Any other questions from board members? Michelle, then Ishay.
Could you, I'm excited about the AP and Principal Aspire programs, and I was just kind of curious to know, of those folks from last year, I know we don't have, I don't know what the number was, in the 40s somewhere. We don't have 40 openings, or at least I wouldn't think that we did. So what are we doing to continue to inspire these folks who want to move up, and making sure that they get either a mentor? What exactly are we doing if they
Right.
didn't get, an AP position or a principal position for this past school year?
Right. We actually, this was the first time, the first year that we kind of had that issue, because we were like, oh my goodness, we have way more leaders prepared to be leaders than we have vacancies. So we actually have a strategic effort. We know who they are. The ones that did great in their interviews made it into either the principal or the AP pool. And we kind of have a partnership between, my office has a director of leadership selection position, and David's office has a director of leadership development. So we work with the career coaching, interview coaching with them, continue to keep them engaged, and they work on development opportunities. Like they're getting stretch roles this year. They're serving on maybe some district interview panels for some of these things, and we're keeping them engaged that way. And they're also sometimes even being used to mentor other new aspiring leaders coming up. So we kind of, for each of them, have a plan that we've worked out to keep them engaged and knowing that we have our eye on them.
I just have one question. I know you mentioned that in some of the buckets of how your recruitment strategy for schools, high poverty, struggling schools, and that this year was the time where you saw those positions being filled before others. What were some of the things that, I guess, what were some of the characteristics, what were some of the drivers that caused that to happen?
Right.
What's a good sign?
Right.
Over the years?
Well, I'll say they started getting better last year, too. It's been kind of every year incrementally ever since we started working on the turnaround strategy and doing the hiring incentives. But a couple of things. The hiring incentives for school leaders, plus numerous other initiatives for retaining them, have really paid off, and we've kept steady leadership in those schools, so that then they are more able to project year over year and know what they need. So I'll say stable leadership, and they're knowing by October, November, what vacancies they may have next year. So the principals themselves, they're getting their budgets earlier, they're identifying their vacancies earlier, and then we have backed up our hiring timelines to the point that we're building pools of teacher candidates for them by November, December. So we're doing their hiring training. We backed that up a month this year and did that in October instead of November. We got their candidates to them in November. And the candidates that were screened by the teacher recruitment ambassadors were given to our higher needs schools actually first. Like the pool was literally open to them earlier. And then we also differentiate our support in human resources. We have 5 staffing directors that work with schools. So our schools that fall in like our higher needs area, they're actually going out to the buildings, sitting with them, doing, helping them schedule their interviews. So we differentiated our support and did a little more hands-on work with those schools this year. And I would say some of those things combined is what seemed to make a difference.
How do you determine as early as October or November what vacancies you're going to have next year? Yeah, how's that been determined?
So it doesn't always work out that way.
Okay.
Sometimes you do still get the surprises. But if they're kind of following some of our best practices that we've trained them on, and they're getting in classrooms early, and they're having conversations with their teachers, they should have a pretty good idea by October, November, if they're going to have some that may potentially not work out. And also, we've worked with them on having what's called stay conversations, with their top teachers about, how happy they are at work, if they're planning on staying or going. And then also the talent reviews that they're having with, where they are discussing all of their teachers and their career trajectory and all. They can kind of have an idea that time of year if they have someone who's in Aspiring Leader program that may get hired up as an AP. Or if they have someone that's ready for promotion and may go to instructional coach. If they have a teacher that's considering retirement that year. You can get a pretty good idea of those things, or or someone who may not end up working out because of performance. The things that you really can't anticipate at that time of year is any new vacancies you'll have in your budget because you receive new funding.
Got it. Thank you.
I have a couple questions. I've seen that the momentum you described with the Aspiring Leaders program. I've seen, particularly on social media, pictures of their gatherings, and it seems like there's a lot of interest in that. In one of the State of the Cluster meetings, I heard a principal talking about how they're sort of setting up their own program at their school. Can you talk about the capacity building that's going on in the school site? You mentioned it. I just wanted to hear more about that.
Yeah, that's actually really exciting. As an HR person, when you sit back and you see these things on Twitter, I remember seeing at one particular middle school, they posted where they were training, where their teacher recruitment ambassador was doing a recruitment training for their teachers at a staff meeting, like about, the referral programs and all that, and they were redelivering that. I've also seen pictures where they are bringing in their teachers and training them on how to do interviews, and their teachers are doing like the first round of interviews. But a lot of those things are what we worked with them on this year in our October hiring for teacher quality training. It used to be just focused on hiring. This year we just kind of said, this is how y'all did last year, this is the shifts, and we spent the rest of the time on creating leadership development plans for staff in your building and teaching them how to do 70-20-10 career coaching plans, to identify who may be interested and like specifically go to them and say, hey, we see potential in you. Would you like to be a department chair? Would you like to be on our interview panel? Would you like to be our greeter for, our new teachers? So we've given them tools for, how to set up all of these different structures. And the ones that are kind of there and ready, you see them like really hitting the ground running. And then some are just like using 1 or 2 of the tools. Some are using 10 of the tools. But we did give them like ready-made, kind of how to do it. And if you're interested in doing X, here's the paperwork or the toolkit, or here's a video of what it looks like in best practice.
Awesome. Can you talk about the trends that you're seeing in the pools, particularly the principal pool? I know we've had vacancies. A lot of them, particularly last year, I noticed. You probably noticed that better than I do, but almost all of them were filled internally. This year we have some external, some internal, some first-time principals being recommended. Can you talk to us about the trends that you're seeing
Right.
there?
So we have seen like an overall increase over the past 5 years in the percentage of internal and external candidates that we've been, the percentage of internal candidates we've been hiring, but it's honestly kind of gone up and down every year. Like in 15-16, we hired 78% internal, but then in 16-17, it went down to 36% internal. Then in 17-18, it picked back up to 55, then 75. And it kind of hops around every year, but overall since 14-15, it's been going up. But it really kind of depends a few things. One, on the number of vacancies we have. Two, where the vacancies, if the vacancies are elementary school, middle school, or high school. And three, the length of time really that we've been doing our Aspiring Leader program and the candidates, the mix of candidates we have in those programs. So it's not an exact science, every year as far as the mixture of candidates that we'll have in the pool and then the vacancies we end up having. And then sometimes there are qualities potentially about an external candidate that we hadn't developed in an internal candidate yet. But year over year, we're seeing more internal candidates have a better shot at the vacancies. But sometimes the school communities are seeing someone that they better matches the leadership profile that they developed. And so you always want to have a little healthy mix of internal versus external. And this year we have a very unique year. It's the first time we've ever only had 4 vacancies. And so we're kind of 50-50 right now, which is, what we were in 17-18.
I think that's a good indicator that there are only 4 vacancies. Also want to point out Mental Health Day, or not Mental Health Day, but mental health support for teachers is very good, and look forward to hearing more about that.
Yeah, we're looking for it to reduce our family medical leave abuse for like stress and anxiety. Also, some of the issues we're seeing come through employee relations as a result of stress and anxiety, and then also just our overall retention. So we're excited.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Our next presentation is around the 2017 SPLOST budget amendment. Larry Hoskins, the Chief Operating Officer, will present that presentation. Welcome.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, Madam Superintendent, good afternoon. The purpose of today's briefing is to clarify the December 2018 SPLOST budget adjustments and funding sources, to provide a SPLOST 2017 revenue update, to advise on the effects of increasing construction costs, and to provide a brief overview of the Georgia Department of Education's local facilities plan. On the slide is a listing of the post-SPLOST 2017 referendum unfunded project priorities. During the December 2018 board meeting, the board approved budget adjustments for Harper Archer and the Phase 2 renovation for the College and Career Academy, approximately $9.8 million. I'd like to clarify that the sources of the funding, excuse me, I would like to clarify the sources of the funding. The funding was originally allocated under infrastructure and systems. Approximately $9.2 million originally allocated for Capitol View and Venetian Hills, and approximately $800,000 from completed infrastructure projects. Revenue collected above the 85% scenario was not used to support these efforts. Information on this slide is an excerpt of the financial document that was attached to the December 2018 action item requesting board authorization to fund the enhanced exterior renovations at Harper Archer and the Phase 2 college and career renovations. The second column reflects funding allocations by category per the 2017 referendum. The third column reflects the December 2018 adjustments of $9.98 million to the construction and renovation line item for the College and Career Academy and the Harper Archer Enhancement Project. As you can see, the infrastructure line item, i.e. Capitol View and Venetian Hill was reduced by approximately $9.98 million, and the construction and renovation line item was increased by the same. A construction and renovation project level look at the December 2018 budget adjustment approved by the board. Specific project adjustments are reflected in the third column from the right. Continued good news as it relates to the SPLOST 2017 receipts. Our SPLOST 2017 revenues continue to track higher than our original planning projections of 85% of total allocation, or excuse me, total authorization. As of February 2019, we had collected approximately $161 million, approximately $13.4 million more than projected. Construction costs continue to rise and are threatening our ability to complete projects as originally scoped and shared with our communities. Cities across the nation are experiencing increased construction costs. In order to deliver projects as originally scoped and communicated to our communities, inflationary budget adjustments are necessary. We estimate a total of $19.4 million in inflationary adjustments will be necessary for the SPLOST 2017 program. This evening, under consent action item 8.02, the administration is requesting that the board approves an $8.3 million inflationary adjustment for projects that are currently in design: Humphreys Elementary, Hutchinson Elementary, and Grady High School. The proposed funding source is SPLOST 2017 revenues above the 85% planning scenario. If the proposed inflationary adjustments are approved, our SPLOST 2017 construction and renovation budget line item would increase by approximately $8.4 million, from $217.9 million to $226.3 million. Third column from the right highlights the requested project level inflationary adjustments. And finally, an overview of the Georgia Department of Education's 5-year local facilities plan. Georgia law requires all school systems to develop and maintain a long-range comprehensive facilities plan that is updated every 5 years to be eligible to participate in Georgia's capital outlay reimbursement program. The plan must contain inventory data, student FTE data, student FTE projections, schoolhouse capacity information, instructional programming information, facility needs, i.e. renovations, modifications, additions, or new schools, and how the district intends to finance the plan. Through this program, the state of Georgia provides funding assistance for local school systems in the construction of new schools, additions to existing schools, as well as renovation and modifications to existing facilities. This assistance comes in the form of several funding programs which systems qualify for on the basis of need as shown in a long-range facilities plan and student enrollment. The funding programs are not meant to be sole funding sources for building projects, but rather as state local funding partnerships to accomplish system facility objectives. State funding is not available until after the project is completed. As our student population is less than our available student capacity, the eligible funds are limited and related to the age of our facilities. There is no funding for new construction and very little funding for major renovations. On the screen are projects from the previous SPLOST that are eligible for partial reimbursement and the current SPLOST 2017 projects that may be eligible and where we are in the partial reimbursement process for each project. Today's action by the board, 8.04, or action item 8.04, will finalize the adjustments to the Boyd and Kimberly projects and will wrap up the actions necessary to submit these projects for reimbursement. Mr. Chair, this concludes my update. May I answer any questions, please?
Thank you so much, Larry. Questions from the board? Ishay, Candace, Cynthia, Leslie.
Thank you so much, Larry. So my first question is just to understand the inflation, the projected inflationary costs. So I know when we were in the process of building out the SPLOST a few years ago, we built in, from my understanding, we had already built in a possible inflation cost, right? What percentage, well, I guess what I'm just trying to get to is like, what percentage was that? And I guess from here at this point, what percentage are we looking at now? And I guess the follow-up to that question, do we need to anticipate building a higher projection percentage moving forward with other projects?
Yes. Excuse me. If you recall, we built this program back in 2016, and we used information and what we were paying per square feet at the time to project forward. My 20 years, typically that has worked. We, in all of our projects, as a part of the project, there's a contingency that's associated with the project as well. And typically the contingency will cover unexpected costs from year to year. But over the since 2016, with the boom in construction, tariffs, some other things that influence the construction market, what we have seen is roughly about a 4.5% year-over-year inflationary cost adjustment relative to our construction projects. So what we have done, and mentioned the $19 million that we've estimated that will need to be added to our program, and those are construction projects from 2018-19 through the end of our current SPLOST 2022. It is our belief, based on the best information we have at the time, that the inflationary adjustments that we're requesting should allow us to be able to complete the scopes of work that were outlined in our SPLOST plan. So on one hand, the increases are challenging us, but as I mentioned before, we're seeing that our SPLOST revenues are tracking well above our previous years, and I'm sure a lot of a major part of that is because of the construction that's going on in the city of Atlanta and the increased cost. So it's costing us on one hand, but we're benefiting with the local economy and all of the construction that's going on through our SPLOST program.
So you stated there was a 4% increase. Is that on top of what was stated in slide 7, that 7.4%? So we're looking at approximately 11.4. And the reason why I just asked that, I don't know if it's something that we have to revisit down the line on the entire project, the projection on all the projects, because sometimes it feels that and I know that's not what we're doing, but I know to the public and outside it may look as if we're pulling from one school project to move towards the next, and that's, we all know that's not the case. So just want to kind of understand, is this something that we really need to look at for the entire remaining of this SPLOST budget versus, visiting, here and there?
Mr. Chair, members of the board member Collins, and Mr. Hoskins will answer the rest of your question, but we know there are more pressures in the SPLOST 27 project schedule. Could be, but they are things that could change on the national political landscape. The tariff situation could change, and by the time we get to those projects, it's not the same level of pressure. I mean, they are still a few years out, so we just don't know. The second piece is the board still wants to do its facility master planning. And there are some questions over the last several months that y'all have asked of yourselves of some of the projects in SPLOST that you may indeed want to talk about and perhaps make some adjustments. We're not sure. So we could, I think you asked a fair question, we could work to build that in. We thought we would take the first baby step to protect the ones that we know are right there, ready to go, and then revisit again with y'all when we do the facility master planning process as part of those conversations, which you do have coming up, I think in this summer by the time your RFP gets done. So you'll have a place to check one more time, and then I think we'll get a better sense of the administration at a national level and whether or not we should be anticipating this as the new norm. There's an election coming up as well, so a lot of things could be different, but we just don't know what that might be. So trying to manage over-committing and then people thinking that more money is going into the projects, but also keeping a mindful eye on it, which is why we listed them all, so that you would know we're not done with this conversation. Did you want to add anything, Larry?
No.
The only other question I have is about the capital outlay program, the reimbursement. And I know we'll be getting, what do we do with the reimbursement? I know it's small. It's like you submitted, you're only going to get maybe like 30 to 40, 35% of the, what do we do with those savings? Do we put, recycle it back in through it, SPLOST, put it back in schools that we, reallocate it?
Well, in the past, we haven't gotten very much money in the past, to be honest. But in the past, what little we did get, I believe, and it was before the current CFO's time, it was actually, we believe, put in the general fund. But Lisa and I have had some conversations and spoken with the superintendent, and I believe going forward, what we're planning to do is to put this money back into the SPLOST program, and it will go under the unallocated portion of funding. So it will come back to, once we get the money, then we will have conversations with the board on how we actually appropriate the money going forward.
Candace?
Thank you. My first question was the same as Ishay, so we'll just follow up with a question about when we used to phrase inflationary costs. Can you just explain more your understanding of what the increase in construction costs is due to, without, I understand that it's probably a complicated factor of geopolitical tariffs and other factors that are beyond the scope of my question, but I'm a little bit, I want to know, here's what I want to know. Is this due to inflation that is predictable over time? My understanding is inflation is just a general increase of prices and the lowering purchase power of a dollar that happens over time. Or is this due to something else that's less predictable that we can characterize as unexpected? And perhaps we can look at slide 8, that chart index that I don't really understand. If you can kind of walk us through that. Again, high level, but getting back to, I think, the heart of Ishay's question, which is, as we are planning next time, how much can we predict and bake into, for example, inflation, which I think is something that happens naturally, versus unexpected events?
Yes. I mean, yes, typically inflation or cost adjustments are predictable, and typically they follow the CPI, Consumer Price Index. But here lately, and I think a lot of it has to do with, again, what's going on in the world from a tariff standpoint, political standpoint. But the other thing that's driving, especially in our area, is just the demand. There's cranes. You can't look, excuse me, anywhere in Atlanta or probably in the metro Atlanta area and not spot a crane. There's just a tremendous amount of construction that's going on in this area. There are shortages with respect to labor, so that's driving, that's part of the reason why we're seeing increased construction costs. Anytime there's this much construction, it's not, again, just not going on in Atlanta. There's a lot of different cities that are, embarking on ambitious construction programs. So the demand for materials right now, steel, drywall, those sorts of things are just, we just haven't seen them at these prices ever. So I think it's a culmination of different things, but I think those labor, workforce shortages, that's probably the biggest portion of what we're experiencing right now.
Okay, that makes sense. And in this chart here, are these like percentages on the left-hand side, or what? Or am I missing something that's obvious?
Right. Yeah. What they're trying to do here is that left-hand side there is normalizing the construction that has been seen for the last since 1950, 60 years. And obviously the horizontal is years. And at the end of the day, what the graph is reflecting is, as you can see, it is construction cost averaged over 30 large cities, and it's at a level right now that just haven't seen in the last 50 years.
And is this the kind of data that we can source and pull on a routine basis so that we have it to plan? I mean, we can follow trends. Obviously,
Absolutely.
we can't predict the future, but we can look at trends to plan ahead.
Absolutely.
Cynthia?
Yeah, they got 90% of what I wanted to ask. Thank you very much for the efficiency here. I do want to just clarify, and I think I know the answer, but I want to be very clear. The requested increases are purely as a result of expected cost increases. Yeah, and that's the right slide. And not due to any changes or additions within the design process. Is that correct?
99% correct.
Okay.
We do have a small amount at Grady High School. There's an area that we want to build out for them to enhance the the robotics program, one of their CTAE offerings. So for the most, 99% of it is inflationary, but just a small amount for the Grady robotics program, which is tied to their CTAE program.
Okay. But the other than that little bit for the one room, this is inflationary adjustments, cost increases, as opposed to any change in what we're doing.
Correct.
Okay. And that one change has been through the submission process and has been approved as necessary?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's all I have.
Leslie?
Thanks. I have a couple of things, if you don't mind me jumping around a little bit. The DOE, the application to DOE to help, do you know what we're 19, so I guess that was 14. Is that report up somewhere?
I'm sorry.
So we apply to DOE every 5 years, correct?
Yes.
And so where's the last one, the last time we did it? Is there 2014?
It's 2014.
Is it online somewhere? And like, how much do we get? And
Well, we haven't gotten it. The Boyd Kimberly Brown projects were a part of that build out. And one of the things that we've talked to GDOE about is that their planning cycle does not coincide with the SPLOST planning
Right.
cycle. They're 2 years in front, so we're always kind of straddling two planning cycles, GDOE planning cycles, depending on where we are with the current SPLOST. So under the 2014 through 2019 plan, which SPLOST 2012 through 2015 was under, the Boyd, Kimberly, and Brown projects were the only projects that actually qualified for reimbursement under those particular projects. As you can imagine, there's just tons and tons of paperwork. We're finally closing out the Brown and Boyd projects, and we hope tonight, if the board passes the or approves the action item, we will submit that information back to GDOE and would expect our reimbursements sometime here in the next month or two. We received the Brown Middle School reimbursement I believe it's about 2 weeks ago.
I thought the action item was, we did that a few months ago, asking for to approve the new 2019 request, correct? The action item tonight is to finalize the paperwork to get that submitted, those reimbursements submitted?
There's two tonight. There's
Okay.
one to ask the board to approve the 2019, and then there's one also for the board to approve the modifications to the
Okay.
Boyd and Kimberly project.
And I guess, just in a nutshell, the reason that what makes you ask them for, money for those specific projects?
Well, those are the ones that actually qualified based on the age of the building. There's just a ton of different things that are contained in their algorithm, but some are student enrollment numbers, capacity, whether the age of different components in the building, the age of the actual building. We, to be quite honest, don't qualify. We don't really qualify for major reimbursement or major renovation money, nor do we qualify typically for new construction, because in the eyes of GDOE, we have too much capacity within our district right now.
Okay. So I guess if that, the 2014 one, and then maybe just having that as a bullet point in our discussions when we talk about capacity, will that math be calculated in by the facilities facilitator? Yeah, but we are going to have a facilities work session with someone that we are bringing in to.
The facilities master
Okay.
plan?
Yeah. And just typically we deal with the SPLOST numbers in terms of that capacity, whatnot. This feels like just a different take on our capacity and why we might want to look a little more critically at where we have large chunks of capacity. It's an observation. Could you clarify on slide 3 that list? I know that was presented at the September meeting. Is it included in this presentation because we're still looking at this as a wish list, or?
Yes, these were priorities or conversations that came about after the development of the 2017 SPLOST program. So after the referendum, we started having these conversations within the district, within our communities, and these are projects, priorities that have surfaced since then that are unfunded. Now, again, in December of 18, the board did approve funding for the Harper Archer enhancement renovations and for the Phase 2 renovations for the College and Career Academy. All of the remaining projects on the list have not been funded.
Correct, but this list, again, was generated by a formal review of most important asks. Just how this list was generated, I want to make sure that we, since it's in this presentation, we get clarity on.
So if we can have the superintendent review how this was created.
And because I know that there are also additional asks from certain projects, Grady specifically, and they're not here, so I wanted to understand how that works in.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, Board Member Grant, and we can, when we get ready to prepare for the facility master planning, I think whoever the facilitator is, each and every board member should have some time to be interviewed by that facilitator to talk about all the different things that people have seen that they may have concerns about or want to be able to raise as part of that conversation. So that's the first piece I think is critical in us being able to move forward on a quality facility master plan. The second piece about this list is, I mean, I know some of them, like I don't feel like, I mean, I'll name some, but I don't feel like these things are necessarily a wish list. I wouldn't characterize it as that, because if you talk to the Harper Archer community about the planetarium or Board Member Mitchell, I mean, people have raised lots of, or what they want for their programming. So for one person, it might look like a wish list. Other one, it may look like a real need. So I would go for the Hollis Pool in the same way. Maybe we need one, maybe we don't. But we do know we have a defunct pool in that building. Do we want to keep it or renovate it, do something else? But the point is, each board member along the way has raised most of these. Some have come from community, like the PAC early learning component, and so you've got a lot of ideas that came forward, but we had limited resources. So what we did as an administration is make no judgment. The pool at Hollis is as important as the planetarium, which is as important as a potential art school, which may be as important as the PACT early learning education request. But whatever they all are, we didn't get rid of them. We just keep collecting so that when you have the facility master plan conversation and all the related available resources in the referendum or anything else, even if you wanted to propose general fund or get ready for the next SPLOST, we left them all on the list. So what we can do is prepare a little description of kind of how they surfaced, who raised them, any of the documentation we have related to that, so that when y'all get ready for that conversation, you have the benefit of what we were able to collect on it, and then you can make a collective decision on whether or not that feels more wish listy, or is it a real need for that particular site. Or maybe it matches more today than it did yesterday, the future vision of the board. But we did not make a decision on whether or not they needed to stay on that list or remove them. Only we believe that the board needs to make some, give us some guidance on the administration side on whether or not you want to keep or remove some of these ideas.
Is there a reason the Grady request was not put on this?
There's not a.
Which Grady request are you referring to?
So hold on, Larry. We know about this because y'all all went and met with the principal. That's the one they're talking about. So.
You're in the project.
Right. So that's what I was going to say. So what, and I did notice the board on that everything that was raised in that communication, they went and talked and put it in the project, which is in the thing you're approving tonight. The only additional thing, which is what Larry said about the 99%, is after a careful look by our CTA people and what would be required for enough space for robotics, we added a little bit more. But if there's anything outstanding on that list that somebody is saying has not been addressed, then somebody needs to explicitly tell me what those are, because we folded them into the action for tonight.
Okay, my understanding was the action for tonight was solely and specifically, I didn't understand the robotics lab, but other than that is solely inflationary index increase. Or is the 5, Yeah, no, if you,
What had started happening was because we had no decision yet on the inflationary cost and the board had not taken action, we had to say these projects may actually have to be reduced. If we do not have action, we can't do all these things. So those conversations were, we're managing expectations for all the projects. Everybody got the same, stump speech about it, which is in part why Grady was concerned that they would not be able to get it done. The conversation that went down was about making sure that if we were able to get this action tonight, that means we don't have to reduce projects. We're able to do our projects at the level that we originally planned.
but,
And
yes,
we
but that
met-
doesn't include anything extra they were asking for.
Yeah, there was some give and take. We met with Betsy Bachman.
The GO team, after the GO team requested a meeting.
Yes. And there was some things on there that, that they were asking for that she backed off of, and there was some things that we were able to, within the project budget and the inflationary adjustments, we believe that we will be able to take care of for the school.
And just for clarity, that's the robotics ask. That's the addition of this robotics ask, because there were several things that
Yeah,
they
there's
had
a
like
whole list
yeah,
that
there's
Betsy.
like a whole list.
Exactly.
Right, and there's
Mhm.
certain ones that we're going to do that still fall within the scope of the original SPOS
Correct.
dollars,
Correct.
which now have inflationary costs that we're looking to approve. And you might have picked, like you said, the one for the robotics to add on, but there's still outstanding issues that have been brought up from the GO team about the function of Grady as a high school, for safety, all kinds of things, the bathrooms, other areas that are not going to be, that don't fall within this scope. And I think, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but I think that's what Leslie's asking for. It could be added onto the wish list.
So hold on. So again, I don't think, I would hope that we would stop calling this a wish list, because that seems like we're just asking for a lot more. There are some legitimate issues that people raise, and to be fair to them, there's rationale for what they're asking for or what we may need to do. What we agreed to with Grady is that they prioritize, which is something they did bring. Some things were legitimate needs, some were a wish list. So they had asked kind of for both. We prioritized that list with them. We came to agreement about those priorities. And then other things that we felt like we could create solutions for, we created those solutions, got agreement between their administration and some of the issues that were raised. And that is what is in part proposed tonight, so we can cover what we can in the project and also need to implement the solutions that were created to address some of the other issues. And some of the other things that were left that were more wish listy would not be able to be accommodated right now. And so we did talk that through with everyone. And while we know everyone's not getting all that they want, a lot of different schools have their versions of a wish list or not, depending on how you see that and some other requests. But we did come to a resolution with Grady.
So,
Can we please see that? Can we see that?
how about
the
how about
projects that were
we
agreed to
how about we
and
do
what
this?
was asked for?
How about we do this? Because I think we're all talking in space without having the document in front of us.
Mhm.
So let's have Larry, with your team, reconcile the requests so that we can see what is actually in the original, what is the addition, and what's left. And we're not going to stop. We're going to stop using the wish list, because I agree, wish is all relative. But I think what Board Member Grant is requesting is that whatever is not part of the project, that was not included in the project, or with this addition that we're going to be considering today, that it should be on this list for future discussions.
And I just want to, saying wish list means that the board has not agreed that these are additional unfunded priorities, to my understanding.
This was brought forward to the board in a retreat in September. I don't recall us being asked to have this be a set list of priorities, because again, it was brought up at that time. I know that there's other things that have been requested in the district, so I'm not trying to diminish any of these projects' value to the system or the communities. But again, I think until this, my understanding, we have not voted to include this as unfunded priorities post the SPLOST referendum. So, and then again, in this presentation, it just would be very helpful if the community could understand, and that it is on paper before we vote on this, exactly what is being put forward here, because this completely, to my understanding, is about the cost escalation, 4.5% year over year. My understanding was that it had to do with inflationary index, or cost of goods going up and services. I do have a couple of things that are not related to that. If you want to go to somebody else, come back up.
Ishay?
I'm sorry, just to add to that, I would like to see that additional list. From my understanding, and I'm just going to back up Larry and the team on this, we've seen the same list prior to September, like last summer, I think. And so, June and August and September. And so we've seen this list, if for me, has not changed. I am very concerned about any additional acts or requests that I'm not aware of. As we have all sat here looking at this list that hasn't been changed, deciding on projects to reallocate and move from. And so we sat at a 2016 meeting and supported a cluster with over $100 million in funding. I do want to see that additional list. I don't want to include it on here because this has not changed, but I would like just to have the knowledge of those additional acts at a later date. So thanks, Mr. Chair, for requesting that.
So I think we're getting a little bit off track. We can talk about all of this for facilities master planning and dive deeper into how we can move forward with these requests and requests that may not be on this list. But Dr. Starfin, if you can, for that particular request, you and your team with Larry, let us know about that after this meeting. That'd be greatly appreciated. Leslie, did you want to ask your questions now, or can we reserve that for facilities master planning?
When is that?
This summer.
Well, if anything change, I mean, I'm happy to. I would like to know, on this list, there are 3 projects that are $3 million allocated to dilapidation of buildings. Will any of that work be done before the facilities master planning is completed?
Nothing on this list, unless it's been approved by the board, will be done.
So there will be no buildings dilapidated, or dilapidated buildings demolished before we have a meeting about that?
Correct.
Okay. And I will not ask about the process for that. And Forest Hills will not be, unless and until we get back to this, Forest Hills will not come back on the list for gym and cafeteria addition.
Forest Hills is on the list for, I think, $1 million, but not for the
7. That was
$7
taken
million.
away from it. Seven. Okay. Okay.
All right. Thank you. Well, I have one final question, just to put a point on it. How much, we keep talking about inflation, but looking at this chart on page 8, there was a dip in the last couple of years until it looks about 2017. So I just want to make sure, how much of the construction cost increase, what percentage came from keep skirting around the issue, but geopolitical tariffs versus actual inflation? Because it seems to me that the cost, even though the city's been experiencing a boom for the last 5 years or plus, was actually going down generally, and then all of a sudden it went up.
Yep.
So what percentage would you allocate?
I'll have to take a look at that, Mr. Chairman. I would, if I had to guess, probably 20, 25%, maybe just year over year inflationary or CPI type inflation. I really think that the bulk of it really has to do with just the demand here, labor shortages, just the phenomenon that we're experiencing and the volume of demand that we have actually within the Atlanta metro area. But we can peel that back and we can talk to some of the economists and some of the folks that we work with to see if we can get a little bit more precise.
Yeah, I think
We'll
that would be
get that to
helpful to know and be more precise on. I think that would go to some of what Candace Jackson was asking, and Cynthia and Isha and others. I just want to know how much of this is the inflation being higher than expected versus how much of this is tariffs that were added in 2017.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Larry.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
your time.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, our last presentation will be presented by Lisa Brecken, our Chief Financial Officer. Lisa, welcome.
Good afternoon, Board Chair Estevez, members of the board, and Dr. Karstarfin. Today I'll be presenting 4 topics related to finance. First, I'll be providing you with the financials for FY 2019 for all activities occurring in the months of July through March within Fund 150, followed by our quarterly report out of student activity funds. And next I will be given an overview of the administration's recommendation for the FY 20 budget, which will be before you this evening for tentative adoption. And finally, Mr. David Keene of Keene Independent Research will be joining us at the podium to provide an update on the district's inclusive practices and procurement initiatives in response to last year's disparity study. With the next 4 slides, we will cover the FY19 financials for the first 9 months of the fiscal year. So far, we have collected 86.23% of the total resources budgeted, with local collections at 97.38%, state at 59%, and other, which includes the Fund 150 Title I transfer in, at 55.74%. We are currently tracking ahead of pace in all categories of revenue as compared to FY 2018, and overall collections are nearly 2 percentage points ahead of last year's pace. We will continue to monitor the pace of collections for the remainder of this fiscal year, but feel more confident that we will meet our budget assumptions. On slide 5, we see the budget to actual expenditures so far for FY19. We have currently spent 69.69% of budgeted allotments, and spending in all functions is appropriate, but ahead of trend for this point in the fiscal year. Slide 6 represents the current spending trend for FY19 against the 18 trend. There is variation in spending, function by function, but overall spend is less than 1 percentage point ahead of last year, where the district spent 98.79% of total budget. Please remember the timing of large expenditures from one month to the next can greatly impact the percentage spend against the previous year. Detailed financials for all funds can be found in Agenda Item 12.05. We have no budget adjustments for you this month, but Agenda Item 12.07 includes the detailed information report for special revenue adjustments less than $1 million that have occurred in the month of April. On slide 7, you'll find the summary of the FY19 third quarter student activity funds report. So far, schools have collected $4 million in activity funds and spent about 86% of those funds. Revenues increased $700,000 or 34% from quarter 2 and are up $419,000 from last year. Expenditures increased $620,000 or 47% from quarter 2 and are up $268,000 from last year. Revenue and expenditures are in alignment with the adopted budget for FY19. The detailed report can be found in Agenda Item 12.06. Next, I'll discuss the proposed FY20 budget. We begin our budget development process in August when we develop the budget calendar. In September, we begin a series of monthly board budget commission meetings during which the board aligns on budget parameters. We discuss revenue projections, the challenges of mandatory cost, and decide on an overall strategy to align the resources of the district with the goals and priorities. To develop a budget of this magnitude and with the unique demands of this district is challenging. I appreciate the work of the Budget Commission, chaired by Nancy Meister, budget team led by Jay Vanicki, senior cabinet, and especially Sky Duckett and her team for the multitude of compensation scenarios they ran this year, and for the budget center managers, including principals, department heads, who work with us to maximize resources for students. I also want to thank Go Teams and BFAC and other community members who assist us in this process. We've made some minor adjustments to the budget recommendations since our last Budget Commission meeting, April 18th. Recall that the budget we are presenting tonight does not include the payments from the East Side and West Side TAD as negotiated in the January Intergovernmental Agreement, or IGA. We continue to work with the city to set up safeguards to ensure that these recurring funds are paid out, but unfortunately have still not been able to secure the $10 million that was due to us already in January of this year. Without a standing payment directive to guarantee the recurring revenue stream provided within the IGA, we cannot fully pass on the governor's proposed raises. Also, without those funds, we still had a budget gap of more than $4 million, which we have closed by cutting $2.7 million of school reserves, eliminating the operational contingency, and cutting a new $1 million that was added to the transportation in the budget request for this year. We've also included $500,000 for the board special election and have added back $100,000 to the internal audit budget. We know that there will be some changes in this budget leading into the final adoption, including final revenue assumptions from the Tax Commissioner's Office, final charter numbers once the state has released the FY20 QBE sheets, and final allocations to partner schools. We are also hopeful that we can bring the IGA to resolution in time for the final adoption in June. On the next 3 slides, we can see the recommended budget resources aligned to each of the expenditure parameters for FY20. These include the continued work of ensuring that our funds are distributed in an equitable way to the individual school sites through SSF for student success funding. This year, more than 66%, or $281 million of school resources were pushed out through SSF. The district continues to invest in turnaround strategy at $10.2 million and another $44 million towards our partner schools. This budget funds a $12 million compensation strategy that includes teacher and instructional support raises at an average of $2,000 per teacher, or 3.3%. Non-teacher pay raises include a step increase for all eligible employees at 1% and for pay grades of 111 through 124. One-time payments are also included. This budget continues to support pay parity work for school resource officers, JROTC instructors, and position reclassifications. However, all these investments and compensation fall short of what the governor has recommended, of what HR recommends, and what the scenario that this board supported at our last Budget Commission meeting. Once we can be certain of the recurring revenue stream as outlined in the IGA with the city, we hope to roll out the full compensation strategy valued at $18.5 million. That proposal includes $3,000 on average per teacher. Details of the various compensation strategies can be found on the budget website in the February, March, and April Budget Commission materials. The FY20 budget continues to support the district's overall charter system operating model, which hinges on site-based decision-making authority. For that reason, this budget continues to allot additional flex funds, cluster funds, and signature funds. Signature funds valued at $12.4 million, up 1.3 from last year. Schools experienced additional flexibility of $23.7 million through EIP and remedial allocated through SSF. Textbook funds increased by $2.5 million with additional $1 million in decentralized funding, bringing that total to $7.5 million. And also this budget commits to long-term funding of the pension liability of a 3% scaling. That's $1.6 million additional for pension, or $56.6 million in total. Through SSF, additional weights were applied to students in grades K through 3rd, which targeted $22.6 million specifically to these grade levels, and invest in funding in district pre-K teachers on the APS salary scale, bringing the total supplement for this effort to $1.3 million. The FY20 budget invests $22.4 million in the arts, music, band, orchestra, athletics, SEL, etc., and $600,000 in leadership development, including relay partnerships, development of teacher leader, aspiring AP, and aspiring principal programs, training for new school business managers, and leadership development of existing principals and assistant principals. Finally, we added 2 new parameters for FY20. The facilities master planning work is ongoing, and therefore the FY20 operational budget does not explicitly call out the general fund support of this work. This parameter will likely carry over to the FY 2021 budget planning. However, this budget does include an investment of $57,500 for the purchase of Let's Talk software to support the district's communication initiative, as presented by Angela Smith last month. On slide 13, you'll see a familiar fund balance graph. While the budget recommended to you today does not specifically target regrowing budget fund balance, we are presenting a balanced budget that does not use fund balance. Recall, however, that this budget includes more than $4 million in cuts to schools and departments and falls short of the full compensation proposal by $6.5 million. With the recurring IGA payments, we could restore these cuts, fully fund raises, and set aside an additional $1.5 million towards regrowing fund balance. With the $10 million as negotiated in the IGA for FY19, this percentage could be 9.6%. As it stands, we enter FY20 with a fund balance of approximately 8.3% of expenditures. On the low end, but still meets the requirements of the board's parameters of between 7.5 and 15%. The FY20 tentative budget assumes less than 4% growth in new recurring revenue with a corresponding increase in expenditures. The overall increase from the FY19 originally adopted budget is $32.6 million. The FY20 budget, general fund budget, is equal to $851 million and includes approximately $15.5 million in consolidated federal funds. This slide represents the general fund budget recommendation by function and shows the greatest increase continues to be instruction function, which includes the charter and partner school allocations as is customary. Slide 16 breaks down the general fund budget by object code grouping. When reviewing this table, it's important to recall that as Woodson Park transitions to a partner school for FY20, funds will be decreased across the various object groups and will be consolidated in professional services. The total budget for FY20 for tentative adoption is equal to $1,133,726,383. The entire budget, including special revenue, SPLOST, nutrition, and student activity funds, as presented at the April Budget Commission meeting, as well as the detailed department and school program sheets, can be found in Agenda Item 9.01. The tentative adoption tonight kicks off the last sprint in this marathon process. At tonight's community meeting, we will be holding our first public hearing related to this budget, and our second public hearing is scheduled for the June 3rd board meeting. We still have one Budget Commission meeting scheduled for May 16th, where we will present any adjustments necessary between the tentative and final proposed budget. We will also be holding 4 regional meetings and encourage anyone who is interested in additional information regarding this year's budget to attend one of those meetings. That concludes my presentation for the tentative budget. Should I pause here or move on to the disparity study work? Just keep moving.
I just wanted to thank Lisa Brecken, our CFO, for her amazing work on the budget, along with Nancy Meister, who's the chair of the Budget Commission. But Lisa, in particular, manages to pull rabbits out of hats and comes up with so many creative scenarios for us to consider. We would not have a balanced budget to offer if it was not for you. So I just wanted to say thank you so much for your leadership and for that incredible brain you have for finance and numbers. I also wanted to say to the listening community that I know that this is not the budget that the board wanted. We worked hard in the last Budget Commission meeting. If I remember correctly, all of you were there, and you all supported the idea of honoring the entire increase that the governor had proposed for teachers in the state of Georgia. As a matter of fact, I remember the chair saying, we want the other scenario. Please try to make that happen. But the balanced budget we have does not allow us to do that because we do not have the payments needed from that intergovernmental agreement that we settled with the city back in January. But I wanted the community, our school community, to know that that is not where the board is, that's not where the administration is, that's not where the CFO is. And I'd like to also say that I have seen, and we are already working on how, if we ever get the money, which should be in the hopper today, and we should have that standing payment directive in place, but we've been tied up in that $10 million payment for the last 4 months. But we are working on a strategy so that if at any point we are able to secure the dollars that this district is owed in that settlement agreement, that we can go back and still provide the full package, and once we secure that additional revenue, even if that means doing it retroactively, which will send the HR department under Sky and the CFO, I know, into a ton of unnecessary additional work, but it is work we've already talked about and we're all, as an administration, committed to do, even if it takes a ton of additional work to make that happen for our staff. It is unfortunate we are where we are today, but that is not because of anything that the board or the administration did. But I am so impressed by the back and forth that Lisa has done with her team to make it happen, and the various scenarios for the human resources compensation design that Sky Duckett presented in the Budget Commission meetings multiple times. And I'd also like to do a shout out to Glenn Brock and our legal team. And they are still working right now in hopes that by the time we get to the legislative meeting, we have a signature from the city as it relates to the beginnings of this effort for the $10 million, so that we can quickly move on this month to the standing payment directive needed for the Eastside TAD $13 million recurring dollars that would allow us to secure the raise for our teachers. But I want to thank the board, and I want the public to know that we appreciate what the board has done and what our budget and finance office has done and our legal department has done to try to make this possible, but we just could not make it to the finish line in time for the tentative adoption. So we will make the recommendation to hold back until we are certain we can afford this raise.
Thank you, Dr. Christarfin. Any questions from the board? Michelle? Candace? But
I'd asked this last week, but in slide 9, and I appreciate the asterisk under district-wide, but if I'm reading the footnote correctly, you're saying that the $620,000 district-wide is coming from the compensation fund? Is that what I'm understanding?
Correct. So right now we have we've pushed into all the budgets a step increase, so that's at a line item level. We still have held back an additional $6 million for the other compensation initiatives in a district-wide account. Because we're still hopeful that this will be resolved sooner rather than later, we have not pushed out that $6 million to all the different accounts yet. So for now, that's serving as a holding account. We have balanced the budget using that district-wide holding account that does hold the compensation for now, knowing that at the May 16th Budget Commission meeting, we'll be bringing to you some additional changes, including charter allotments, partner allotments, and also local revenue, a forecast for local revenue that's going to be much tighter. So that is just a holding place right now. It is a balancing line item to get us through tentative adoption into the May 16th Budget Commission meeting, where we have more information. And at that time, that will be distributed and pushed out. And we will be having another conversation about charters, partners, and also local revenue projections.
Okay, thank you.
Candace?
Thank you, Lisa. On slide 15, I think it was slide 15, I may have misheard something you said, the budget by function slide. I think you were just doing overall looking at the 851 million number there, but then I think you said something like that that represents this percentage of state or federal funding. Will you just say that again, please?
Sure. So because APS is one of the pilot districts for consolidation of federal funding, we actually are able to push in some Title I dollars into our general fund. And so when we present general fund, it's a consolidated general fund that includes about $15 million of Title I. We do try to always call that out because different districts will benchmark against us and we look like we're carrying a much higher general fund, but it does include that $15 million of Title I also. Schools have flexibility with those dollars that act just like their general fund dollars for personnel, non-personnel, or any other school-based initiatives.
Thank you so much, Lisa. I think we can now move on to the next portion.
Okay, so at this time, I'd like to ask for David Keene of Keene Independent Research to join me at the podium for a brief update on the work related to the disparity study. I'm going to tee this conversation up very quickly. As a reminder, Mr. Keene was asked to perform a disparity study focused on SPLOST-funded contracts for construction, architecture, engineering, and IT for July 2011 through June of 2016. He analyzed those contracts against census data, interviews, market research, etc., in order to make a determination of the inclusiveness of APS contracting practices. He then reported his findings in the October 2017 board meeting, and we'll discuss them in a moment again tonight. In short, he found that there did exist some disparity in these SPLOST-funded contract categories. He made 4 recommendations to the administration at that time, including increasing outreach and education of potential bidders about the APS procurement process, re-examining the APS methods to select construction and A&E contractors, a further review of methods to procure IT services, and to overall increase utilization of MWBE for construction, A&E, and IT contracts. The timeline on slide 22 shows the progress that has been made and highlights next steps as we continue to increase inclusivity efforts in SPLOST procurement practices and overall procurement for the district. The decision was made at that October 2017 meeting to target neutral approaches and strategies with a focus on communication and education. Our immediate next steps included increasing our vendor outreach program and expanding vendor training, proactively informing the business community of our commitment to inclusion, and updating the procurement website. We also revised language in our formal solicitation documents to encourage inclusion of MWBE and requiring reporting of prime vendors' utilization of minority and women-owned subcontractors. Some of these artifacts can be found in the appendix of this presentation. Today we'll receive an update on how those immediate steps may be faring, and over the next year we will continue to design and implement a monitoring and tracking system to track and review whether the neutral measures just discussed were successful. Future steps, should those measures prove to not address disparity in the way we hope, could include setting explicit goals for targets for MWBE representation, or to consider reestablishing race and gender conscious components of MWBE programs. So with that overview, I hand it over to David Keene to discuss the mid-process.
Well, thank you very much. I'm pleased to be here, and I want to commend APS. There's kind of a 5-year look to these studies, a disparity study to see if there was fairness and equity in APS contracting practices. And my expectation, given I've done this work for 100 other clients around the country over my career, my expectation is 5 years from now, or 5 years from October 2017, I would have gotten a call back and say, hey, come do another disparity study for us. So APS handled this differently. They said, hey, we're a year and a half into this, and I think with the urging of the board, tell us how we're doing before we get to an end and maybe we're not happy with what we're doing. So here's both the good and maybe what you're still working on. And as I want to quickly talk about what a disparity study is, here's one of the key slides from the past disparity study that we presented to this board in October 2017. A disparity study analyzes the utilization that an agency has in its direct or indirect contracts with minority and women-owned firms, and compares that with what you might expect if there were a level playing field. This is one of the summary slides out of my presentation to this board in October 2017, where we said, for minority-owned firms in particular, the actual utilization that you directly with your construction and IT and A&E contracts, or through your construction management firms under the master agreements, really is missing the mark of what the availability would indicate, capabilities and availability of minority-owned firms to be able to do. So we found a very large disparity for minority-owned firms. We made a number of recommendations to APS to consider starting with a number of what are so-called neutral measures, small business-friendly approaches, and with the understanding that you had some agreements in place for the construction management companies doing the SPLOST work back in October 2017 that weren't going to be, you wouldn't rebid them and put new provisions in them to encourage equity and inclusion until about this time this year. So some of our recommendations were, we got feedback, because we talked to a lot of people, we got feedback that some of the prime contractors you're working with in your master agreements indicated that they didn't know that equity and inclusion was a priority for APS. I said, we would have done this all along if you'd let us know that you were interested in this. We work with minority women-owned businesses all the time, and a lot of other local agencies in the Atlanta area require that. So one of our recommendations is, well, you can quickly remedy that. Tell them that this is important to APS. You've done that. You need to, this organization had a formal minority and women business enterprise program about 12 years ago, 14 years ago. We are very familiar with that plan. Some of the measures that were in that plan are even relevant today. And we reiterated what are small business friendly practices short of going to minority and women business goals in your contracts. So we recommended those. We looked at how well you've been implementing those. And then anticipating that you're going to have new master agreements in place, have you laid the groundwork? Have you bid those new contracts in a way that will help you hold the feet of those contractors and consultants to the fire when you say, hey, what's the minority and women business inclusion as they manage those contracts and have work actually done in school sites? And have you reached out to minority women-owned firms? And have you been tracking and reviewing? So we identified some barriers. Let me go over these first. You have some systems issues, you have a resources issues, but primarily you needed to have these new contract in place issues to be able to do more. And you have some of the tracking in place, but it's very limited at this point. So we've made recommendations in a detailed report to staff about where you are, and really to summarize it, you've taken the baby steps in some areas and put yourself in a good position to move quickly and rapidly ahead in ensuring equity. In other cases, you moved rapidly ahead from the get-go. So concurrent with the October 2017 board meeting, there was a number of letters that went out and educational efforts that went on immediately to the contracting community, to vendors, to let them know the priorities of APS, and most importantly, to educate potential bidders and vendors about how to do business with APS. It's important for me to point out to you all that our study focused on construction, A&E, and IT because that's where a lot of the SPLOST money was focused. The actions of APS have gone beyond that. They have included other types of goods and services, including in the vendor outreach and education. You now have handbooks that are available to educate vendors about how to do business with APS. It seems like you are turning the page in some old practices towards a new transparent system where those vendors may have greater confidence in their ability to do business with APS in a fair and equitable way. And so we've seen a lot of progress there. A lot of the vendor outreach that you've done has been very effective. You just need to get the systems to catch up with the efforts that the staff have made. So I wanted to give you this report. Doing this very quickly, we've given a lot more detailed results to staff on what the next steps are, and what you may need to rethink, but also keep going and doing well what you've accomplished so far.
So before concluding this section of the presentation, I did want to highlight some of those positives from the communication and education work that has been occurring over the last year and a half. These are our findings, not Mr. Keene's, and do not apply specifically to the scope of the disparity study, which did concentrate on those SPLOST funds. However, We do see MWBEs are growing as a share of new vendors that are registering directly with APS for all funds. Only 13% of newly registered vendors in FY17 identified as MWBE, but that jumped to 49% in FY18 and stands at 42% already for FY19. This also applies to spend. For FY17, only 5% of expenditures to newly registered vendors were to self-reported MWBEs, but for FY18 that jumped to 12% and it is at 14.3% so far for this year. We believe that the fact that our outreach, communications, and training has been broad and not targeted only to specific groups within the disparity study has attributed to these gains. Finally, I'd like to remind the board of our immediate next steps in regarding to this work. We plan to hire a full-time FTE to serve as the liaison between the procurement office and finance and the SPLOST-funded initiatives located in operations and IT to standardize the approach and the tracking of data. This person will also be responsible for undertaking the extensive analysis of where our current APS procurement policies, procedures, and practices may unintentionally create barriers for MWBE vendors. We will continue collecting and tracking data and begin reporting out on our website once sufficient data has been collected and is available. And we're also exploring with IT opportunities within the Lawson system or other vendor management systems that support inclusion efforts. If after the next round of efforts, analysis, and reporting, we do not see the expected outcomes, we will begin to implement more aggressive actions to include re-implementing a program and or hiring additional staff. That concludes this section, and I'm available for any questions you might have at this time.
Any questions? Michelle? Oh, I thought you said Isha. And then me. Yeah.
I just had a couple of questions in regards to, I think it's slide 7, just understanding how we're addressing some of the barriers tangibly. I know a lot of this was the knowledge based on what was revealed. And so in regards to the legacy, the second bullet point, the legacy internal procurement and vendor management systems, how have we, I know you stated that wasn't our focus and priority, and I'm glad to hear that the administration we're moving in that direction. What does that look like? And then the second one, the second question, there was a statement made that a lot of these practices, based on when we asked for the study and initiated the study, a lot of these practices wouldn't take place until now. So are we doing these practices for the 2018-2019 procurement year, or these are things that we're going to launch for 19-20?
Sure. So you want to speak to the technology piece? I know you're experienced.
So this is probably not just this is a government agency issue. It probably would not surprise you that there's some paper pushing involved in your procurement system that does not make it small business friendly. You can do all the outreach in the world, and you get a stack of papers back that you input into an internal vendor management system. You don't buy most of your procurements out of that vendor management system. You have an external system. It's impossible to put an MBE, WBE status in your external system at the current time. In your external vendor system is a system that many schools and other agencies are involved with. So as I was sitting here waiting to present, I looked at my updates from your bonfire system, and I have a beer study for Marshall University that came up because I'm now registered in your external bonfire system. If you're a local vendor and you want to do business with APS, this is kind of a blunt tool because you're going to get a lot of RFPs from Marshall University to do beer studies along with APS procurement. It doesn't really meet your needs to be able to do outreach to the small business community that may be very focused in trying to do business here in Atlanta and have a very focused set of things that they're trying to break through to be able to offer the schools. This isn't anybody's fault here at APS. It's just a tool that isn't well designed to your current purposes. And your internal vendor management system is also not well designed because you collect a lot of information on who's a minority women-owned business. You just can't push out those notices to buy the things that you need to buy because they need to go through this external system. This is probably more detail, including the beer study in Marshall University, you needed to know, but it's just, if I'm experiencing some frustration with this, you know your local small businesses are too. And even with the best intentions and efforts and more manpower, person power at the school to try to make this a fair and equitable procurement system, and your talent here has dramatically improved since I was here last time to be able to do that. You don't have the systems that help them. That's going to continue to be an issue for you. I think you can work all the way through this, but it's hard to make this happen without it being a high priority for the organization.
So some of the things that we're doing on the administrative side to address that, a new bonfire system or including additional functionality of the bonfire system, it would take resources, and it is not currently something we've built into the FY20 budget to do that, but it's something that we can continue to work with the vendor or the provider on seeing what functionalities we might be able to turn on. Also, we are still working through a Lawson system update for the financial management system, and we're hoping that once we get on the other side of that update, we'll be able to look at what Lawson might have embedded in its functionality that we might be able to turn on and utilize for these efforts. Your second question, can you remind me of that?
I think that, yeah, my second question was, I think you kind of answered it. It was stated that a lot of these recommendations could be implemented for this year, and it sounds like they may not, but I wanted to at least know like what tangible direction are we doing?
Sure. I think one of the biggest things that we will see as impacting specifically what was looked at in the disparity study is that our construction contracts have just gone out for rebid. So those are back. They're embargoed. They're in the process right now of actually working through those. But it's as those contracts are being rebid and coming back up that we'll be able to see some of the biggest movements in the disparity study work, and we'll be able to track and monitor that a little bit more.
So if it was just stated that our management system, our procurement systems are not up to the level to capture and support small businesses, then with the new construction contracts that are going out, how are we capturing that information? Are we doing the paper route? Like, how are we capturing that participation?
So we'll be logging that in Excel, an external Excel file for now. And then part of this initiative in getting a full-time FTE dedicated to this work will be in standardizing what that reporting looks like. So garnering what information we can get out of our system and what information we have to go collect on our own, and standardizing how we then report that information back out. So that will be developed as we're going through this bidding process.
One of the challenges was you didn't have in your contracts with your construction management companies, say during the last disparity study, you didn't have the requirements for equity inclusion in those contracts. Now you will, and you can hold them accountable to get that effort, and we're confident that you have the tools in place to do that. So that the time difference is, 2017 didn't have that contract language in place. Later in 2019, you will. So the contracts going forward, you ought to, and these firms know how to do this. You just have to ask them to do it and monitor it and hold their feet to the fire. So this is something that's been very effective in Atlanta over the years. It's just not something that was an APS priority in the last decade, but now it can be again, and you should see the results fairly immediately.
Cynthia.
On one of these slides, you referred to unbundled contracts. Can you provide a little more information about what those are? What are they? Why do they typically result in a higher MWB participation? And why does it cost more to have them?
An unbundled contract is something that you might group together, which might be administratively efficient. You might get a better price on. Usually will be bid on by larger firms, and you'll contract with a larger firm. You can also break into smaller pieces.
Like, for instance?
Well, I'm not an expert on schools, so I'm not going to venture in because I have been surrounded by experts on schools. I know something about highway projects. So one of the things that state departments of highway do is they say every little maintenance contract, or cities sometimes do, every little maintenance contract, we're just all over the state, we're going to put into one contract. So a firm has to be big and can do work throughout the state to be able to bid on that contract, which will tend to eliminate smaller firms. In an Atlanta marketplace, 50% of the small firms are minority or women-owned firms. So you're disproportionately affecting MBEs and WBs by doing that. I'm sure there are school equivalents to that. With your current construction management contracts, you do have kind of a master agreement for firms to go get the trades that are going to do the specific works on the schools. So that is, in one way, is bundled, and it's an efficient way for you to manage those contracts. What we're looking for is, because you've aggregated some of that construction management work, you don't have as many construction managers as you do have projects. You have a smaller number of construction managers. As they go out and compete for those contracts, make sure that they're getting participation of small businesses, that they're not bundling that work on your behalf. You ensure that they unbundle that work as much as is practicable.
How do we get them to do that? Because I think you also refer elsewhere to the difficulties in getting our primes to do that with our
I don't want to oversimplify, but it's almost as basic as asking for it. You tend to get what you ask for, and if you don't ask for it, you don't get it. So you hadn't been asking for it in the past. You are asking for it now, and I think you can ramp up the methods if you're not getting what you want from certain firms that are going to get these master agreements, to get that in the future. You're starting with a very, these programs are often legally challenged at the minority women business programs. They have been in the Atlanta area. You're starting with a very safe version of trying to ensure MBE, WBE participation. And again, I think what Lisa described is, if you don't get that over time, you have some other methods to try to get that. You can ramp up if you need to.
I agree with the incremental approach where we start small and build out. And I don't want us to get into a situation like the city did some years ago with legal challenges to that. I just want to figure out how we can make those baby steps a little quicker, so we get a little further down quicker.
Well, one of the ways we do that, Cynthia, is by having presentations like this where we can ask questions. I think this is an example of where the board can continue to keep it on the forefront of everyone's mind. This was a presentation that was requested by Vice Chair Collins for that reason, to continue to make sure that it's on everyone's minds, and so that everybody knows that it's a priority of hers and many of us. So I, for one, think it's very important for the people we give contracts to reflect the diversity of our school system and their families, and the families that attend our school system. So I am happy to hear about the steps we've taken. I share in my colleague Cynthia Briscoe-Brown's urgency to continue to take steps and bigger steps, and look forward to receiving an update next year on how all this is going. And I'm particularly excited with some of the methods that y'all have used, particularly the unbundling, and hopefully we can look into technology and expanding our capacity to monitor and track all this stuff. Just to be sure, just be clear, these initiatives are all system-wide, not just construction, not just our major contracts, but they're all of our contracts.
That's correct.
Okay. And some of these next steps on page 30 are included in the budget. Others are not. Any of these you would, either one of you, are there any of these that would be critical that you would put down as extremely important to accomplish our vision for minority participation?
Yeah, so having the ownership of the full-time FTE, I think, is going to be huge. Somebody that can focus purely on this work, I think will get us really far. I think the next piece that we need to look at is the vendor software. So the Bonfire, working with the vendor to see what we can do already within the payments that we make to them and what we might need to invest in to do more. I would think those are the two most critical next steps.
And I would also just add that to Cynthia Briscoe Brown's point and the chair's point. We don't know what it's going to look like when we start the real unbundling, and even in unbundling, we might have to make additional steps if we really want to have minority and women contractors. So it's still, I mean, when we look at the city, they have a department that manages this. In Austin, where I was, and I think Mr. King, we went, this feels like forever ago, but we all went to look at places and study what they were doing. But that's part of what people talk about, that they actually have to build out support for this. And so we know that this year, we're still trying to get through our teacher raises, much less build out a department related to managing all of this. But most of the people who are doing this work most aggressively, making the bigger steps, are the ones who have made those kinds of commitments. So we'll have to talk about that in our next budget cycle as well. We'll start with what we have, but I would say that's another piece that we're going to have to lean in hard on if you want to make a significant difference in a short period of time. Are y'all done? Because I just wanted to close out. Did you have another question? I'll wait then.
Close out on.
I just wanted to make sure I had a chance to close out.
Okay.
I'm done.
Leslie?
I did want to figure out in terms of food service contract, which is a large contract, and I know that in the past there's been minority participation on that. Are we looking forward to that, and where does that fit with all this? I know that wasn't part of the original look at.
Mr. Chair, members of the board member Grant, so to Mr. King's point, his study was about SPLOST. He was really looking at what we were doing in construction and services around that. What Lisa's charge is, and the procurement office's charge is about, and is going to continue to be about, is looking at all contracts. So where we have an opportunity, and again, with food nutrition, which I will talk about in a moment, we have the hand that was dealt to us over the last couple of years, and it is what it is, related to the challenges around that contract. But what I think the opportunity around this work will allow us to do, whether it's food and nutrition or custodial services or anything else that we would be soliciting contracts for, is an opportunity to rethink that. So I know we've had a lot of conversations in food nutrition about should we bring it back in-house. And part of the reason we needed time to be able to do that is that maybe it's not about being in-house. Maybe it's about breaking up that contract. I don't know what it would be, but I do think this allows us, if we're able to get our arms around unbundling in general, and also thinking about the needs of each of our areas and clusters and what school communities would prefer, you have a real opportunity in food nutrition to address that. Of course, it's different. We want to make sure we're not going into the red on that, and so on and so forth, and there might be some federal or state limitations, but I think that's one of many we could start really making some headway on. Of course, we're starting with SPLOST, but we're going to be moving through the rest of the district as well. And so I'll close out by saying thank you to Mr. King. This is him excited. This is him just wanting to share all that he has learned about APS. But he's a very professional, serious, get-to-it, I guess contractor, but certainly expert in this work. And so I forgot how long ago we all started talking about this, but you did make an effort to go see some of the places and some of the organizations we believe would help us accelerate our work. You looked at all of that. You made this actually more affordable for APS by using all of your access and information that you already had in your company. I want to thank you for that, because every dollar counts for APS, and you are incredibly generous with your time and your contacts and your information. I also wanted to, so thank you, and again, that's you happy. So, so the dry as dust style has grown on me. And for taking time to explain all of this to our team. You did do a great job, and people were so appreciative of that. I also want to shout out the last board and Courtney English, the former chair, who answered many questions from the community about what was happening with these contracts. We went to several, probably dozens of meetings. I remember being in churches, meeting with lots of different folks and organizations, from faith-based to real contractors, and they shared with us a lot of information, and he took that very seriously and worked with the former board. So thank you to them. They're not here today, but everyone unanimously supported this effort. And so I just wanted to say thank you to him for attending those meetings and working with me offline to get us off the ground and to figure out what we needed to be able to get Mr. Keene on board. And of course, thank you, Lisa, for making it a seamless transition from your predecessor as well. So it has been a team effort, a multi-year effort, and I just want to thank the community for reaching out to us during that time and giving us the time to get to where we are today. And without your patience and understanding, this could have been incredibly controversial, and we could have created a lot of distractions for ourselves, but people really gave us the time to get the work done. So I want to thank everyone who's been part of that. And some are at the board table, some are in the administration, some are our consultants, but many of them are people in the community who want to see us move forward. So thank you to all of you.
Now we transition to the food and nutrition contract.
Yes, Mr. Chair, members of the board, last month we had an agenda item related to our food and nutrition contract. There were some questions related to that leading up to the meeting itself and the action. There was a spring break in between that, and so the logistics of timing complicated our request and wanting to see action as it relates to this item. But over the last month, the board did pull that agenda item off, but over the last month, we have been working with the proposed vendor and also with our labor associations and our team to make sure, and the board, to make sure that all questions were answered. We do feel like we're in a better place today than we were a month ago around some of these questions, but I wanted to be sure that we, again, at the chair's request, extended the time to the board in case there were other things that people wanted to ask about. Excuse me, I'm sorry.
All right, so questions, if there are any. Questions, if there are any? Leslie, anyone else? Michelle? Okay. So Leslie, Michelle.
So I know that there's been just for the public to understand, there's been a lot of correspondence that's gone back and forth on this on email. And one of the core questions, well, there's several, I think, that has more to do with process and timing. There is language in our RFP and in this contract that states that the superintendent shall have sole authority to issue this contract and to renew this contract. So I think the thought that the board is somehow going to step into the middle of this, I don't feel comfortable with that. I do think there have been a lot of points of clarity that members of the employees have had, and I think they have been able to ask a lot of those questions, and again, I'm not quite sure why the timing was the way it was. And this is part of a normal process. Our food service contract has to be renewed every 5 years. And I am hopeful that we will do a very robust process of analyzing in the future how we deliver food to our children, the quality of that food, and how we do not end up turning this contract over every few years. It is disruptive. It is certainly makes the employees feel unstable in that process, and it is, given our role as oversight of the board, to be able to feel confident about the fact that we're doing this correctly. It's I hope that we do not have this put forth the way it has been this time again. But again, the authority to administer this contract rests with the superintendent. So,
there are a couple points there. Glenn, I know you want to clarify the authority piece.
Yeah, I want to make sure I understand Board Member Grant's comment about the authority of the superintendent to make this selection. That's in accordance with your purchasing policy, DJEA. And I don't know if you're just reiterating that or if you were saying that's of a... Yeah, and it's from your policy. Your policy, DJEA, states that the authority to purchase, obligate district funds to an agency outside of APS is vested in the superintendent, with the authority to purchase or contract to purchase materials, supplies, equipment, and services. I just want to make that clarification.
Yeah, so I think what you're hearing from our general counsel is that that language was placed there from our policy, which is board policy. And
DJEA.
I think one of the reasons that needs to be clarified is shouldn't be insinuated that this is trying to keep the board out of any one contract. It is a policy of the board to keep the board out of the procurement process for a reason. So I just want to make...
It was not my insinuation.
Okay.
The insinuation is that there's been a lot of public outcry for the board to step in at some point and do different things. And I just want the public to understand that is not our role here.
Thank you. I was in the middle of making my comment. But I think it's important for us to know, to clarify our roles and responsibilities, that the board explicitly, for some time now, has removed itself from decisions like this, from decisions like personnel, for a reason. And it's important for us to make sure we clarify those roles, not only internally, but also with our constituents and the stakeholders out in the community. Leslie, any other questions? Yeah. I think, Maria, you wanted to...
Yes, I just wanted to inform the board and the community that the administration followed the process as we have, as it relates to all of our goods and services, the same way for the last several years. I haven't changed that. The way we've done the recommendations have been the same. As far as it relates to concerns about an ever-changing contract, some of you were on the board, some of you were not on the board when back in 2017, things got pretty dicey around food and nutrition. I want to be clear with everyone. APS knows, given all that we have going on, changing a food vendor after we just were forced to have to change a food vendor is the last thing that we wanted to do. APS is not choosing to just switch vendors. In 2017, Sodexo terminated their contract with APS so late in the year that we did not even have time to issue an RFP and use a process. We were forced, and we had to go to the state and ask for permission to enter into a contract with the existing second highest scoring vendor for the last RFP that had been issued. That vendor was Aramark. The contract with Aramark was for a 1-year contract only, and it had a 1-year renewal option, which ends on June 30th, 2019. Even though that we elected to use that renewal option, we even went to the state again and said, given that we just finished managing the abrupt end of the Sodexo contract and just getting stabilized with the new vendor, the state did not extend APS to do the next renewal option going beyond the original design. And so we did have to do a new competitive solicitation for a food service management contract. We are following state and federal guidelines for food and services obtained by the USDA and the state funding for our nutrition program. As part of the federal and state guidelines, it is required that a competitive solicitation be issued and awarded at least every 5 years for goods and services. Georgia state law limits school districts to 1-year contracts, but we have the ability to renew annually for up to 4 additional years. So in order, and Elise Morningstar helped me, we had Sodexo, year 1, right? Then they did year 2, but then they ended it abruptly. We had no choice. We went to the second vendor, and we had to beg for that from the state, which was Aramark. They had that first year. Then they got the second year because we asked the state to please let us renew again. When we asked for the third year, which would have given us our 5th year, the state said no. And we know that we had to get to the 5th piece by doing the solicitation process. Do I have that correct? Okay, so that's what happened to us. APS is not trying to flip vendors all the time, but we did do a solicitation process. We did follow the procurement process, and I will say this. I do think the timing of board meetings, which we have agenda setting for, often comes after a holiday because you're trying to nail the first Monday of the month to stay consistent with your board policy and our procedures around board meetings. And perhaps we need to revisit that with agenda setting, but I want everyone to know that APS the administration, did not try to set this up after spring break in a way that somehow was made to convolute the process. We did the best we could with the timing we had and the limitations we have from the state and federal government, and we also ran a tight procurement process.
I think I'm all right so far.
Cynthia?
This is not so much a question, but a comment that I appreciate the work that Humana Embry has done and in both raising some questions and then helping through her own work to resolve those questions on behalf of our union. She's stepped in, and we appreciate what she's done to get her own questions answered and to establish a working relationship going forward that I think is going to be very productive. That's all.
Ditto. Dr. Christopher?
Yeah, and thank you, Board Member Briscoe Brown, for raising that. I'd also like to shout out their representative for them as it relates to working with labor and the potential vendor. Alan Lee also worked very hard over the last, especially 72 hours with us. I want to thank SFE for being so responsive to creating a assumptions agreement and looking at the existing contract to ensure that any questions about compensation, benefits, leave days, working conditions, any and everything that staff members or members of the Labor Association had, he collected and worked all weekend with our potential new service provider to be sure those things were addressed and met the expectations of Umita Embry and ASME related to this. So I want to thank him as well. He was the person I worked with when we had the challenge with Sodexo and Aramark, and in both occasions, he has been an incredible advocate for our workers, but also very thoughtful about making sure that we are honoring the belief and the vision of this board on how you want workers treated, whether they're contracted through someone else or working for the district. And I think those two things were achieved with that combined leadership.
Ishay?
I guess I really didn't have a question based on the comments that was just made in particular, because I do know that was one of the reservations that the board expressed last month, was the involvement of our employees and making sure that the staff, transition is hard, but making sure that we know it's going to be, transition is hard, and making sure that we try to alleviate as much of that burden as possible on the employees that'll be switching a vendor. And I think, I don't know, Dr. Starfin, if you still want to talk about what has happened within the last 30, what progress has happened within the last 30 days for us to consider as this recommendation comes before us again tonight.
Yes, Mr. Chair, members of the board, Board Member Collins. I think at the outset, it was about board member questions, trying to be sure that even from any kind of process or district policy level, that you had more time to submit questions, to have us go back and verify or raise more questions within our own procurement process, or even with any potential staff or members of the labor association that were working through the contract and working for us. So that was the first big step, I think, that got addressed in the last 30 days. The second one was solidifying who would actually be the representative that would carry on behalf of the labor association, not APS, because we can't do the negotiations for them, but to make sure that that ASME had a direct pathway to get their questions answered from the very people they would have to be working with. And so that, I think, was achieved. The representative for ASME was named and then started the process for getting those questions and relaying them to the leadership and the executive team of ASME. I also think it gave us an opportunity over the last 30 days to work with our legal counsel to ensure that we were all working through the process in an appropriate way, that no one was tripping up on policy or practice or going beyond their authority in this. We also, I think, got a lot better about, and I do understand the policy position, but I think the board was working hard to try to keep a line around what was the board work and what was the administration's work. I think that was a little confusing at the outset based on what some people had requested. It did imply that getting into some of those weeds were governance and the administration. I wanted to have a clear understanding of what we were expected to do and what we had to produce for the board that you had to actually act on, and what was information you were interested in knowing but was not part of this action. So the legal team leaned in a lot on that. We also took the last 30 days. There were questions, articles, stuff out there about the potential vendor that we wanted to also vet and make sure that if other districts or other institutions had experienced a certain hiccup with the potential provider, that we asked about that, and we asked them to look at those things and to provide answers to us on what would that mean for Atlanta Public Schools, or if those things had actually been resolved within their organization and had been addressed across their institution so that any new client that was coming on board would not have those issues. So those 30 days allowed us to do that as well. I think there was not so much on our part, but I think on the labor side, they were doing some legal research as well. So I don't know the results of that, but I do know that they were doing that internally as well from a national level, just to be sure that if it was from a national perspective, people understood how it worked in Georgia and what our policy was, and whether or not SFE had, would potentially violate something based on the fact that they don't have a lot of contracts in Georgia, and that we would be one of their largest contracts here, if not the largest. So we wanted to be sure that they understood what we have to do in Georgia and the expectations of the board. So I think over those 30 days, a lot happened. Things really picked up, like I said, in the last few days. But tonight, it is with great confidence that I'll still be recommending SFE as the provider.
Just a follow-up to that is from this experience, and I know this is our second, for me, this is the second round going through this. Is this a practice, as we're also, just came off the heels of a conversation on procurement and our contracts, is this part of, this process? Do we want to move forward to include it moving forward? Not in regards to, I won't go as far to say as a criteria, but to say, like, to make sure that company has buy-in from that, from the employees or association or something like that. Is it something that you can see being a best practice, I would say, like a best practice that we can initiate in the future if this ever comes up to?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, members of the board member Collins. Yes, I am so hopeful that we get through 5 years. And at the same time, get some more progressive work done. I think there were questions earlier about, the minority contracting that I think are important as well to think about. But right now, what I think we've learned through this process, especially if it relates to labor associations and what we've talked to procurement about and what we've talked to legal about, is I think we should go, just like we will for minority and women contracting. How far can we go to make sure that in a procurement process, can we go as far to the wall as we possibly can to make it clear to any vendor, especially as it relates to food and nutrition, because there are hundreds of people involved in providing that service, to include and put at the forefront expectations around working conditions, compensation, anything that would be of importance to our labor associations. And I think that is something that is a learning that I know has limitations, because you can't set targets and things of that sort. But that we do believe we can make some headway on. The General Counsel and procurement know that that's a priority for us, and I do think we'll have to get labor to the table to talk about that and find the right spot or the line that we can go to get as many of those questions answered on the front end, so we're not, after approving a contract, having to talk about those things on the back end. And that would be, I think, a real evolution for us as it relates to this. And then and I think the last piece is, which is something we did do. We did provide the agreements that we had with the current vendor, so that people could see what that looks like. But it's hard to hold people accountable to that without knowing how far we can go as the responsible party for the procurement process. So I like that question. I think it's something we need to really drill down hard on, and then and find that sweet spot on how far we can go to get those things resolved before the administration makes a recommendation.
Any other questions about the contract? I'll highlight that food services generally has been a topic that's come up over time, and that's something that we should, as a board, prioritize to have a conversation if it's the will of this body to do so. I know we have a lot of different conversations we want to have on a number of topics, but I think it would behoove all of us to prioritize this, particularly in this meeting, food services generally, and the vision for it versus any particular contract. So I think the board should continue to think about that and where this falls on the priority list.
So I wanted the board to know that that both ASME and the district and the administration based on everything that's happened, really supports what SFE has done with ASME on a CBA commitment, the collective kind of bargaining agreement commitment. It's the concept of a kind of a bridge agreement until the contract is approved so they can get into the detailed negotiations. We do have a commitment from them that ASME is comfortable with and does support. And at the same time, we have raised with their leadership and made clear, I have personally done it myself, that the SFE, that we expect them to honor those commitments, that there can be no shenanigans, no games after the fact, and that we all have to work together as a team to go ahead and, if the board approves, do a successful transition for the purpose of doing right by our staff and also doing right by our schools and kids who need us as soon as this summer, where we're still providing food services, and they need us to have this right and to have a seamless transition. So they know that this is important to us, that it is a value of the board and the superintendent and our procurement office, but it's also, we also have their commitment to see this through and to honor their commitments that they agreed on with ASME. So I wanted y'all to know that we went that one step further to get their commitment to not back off of anything that they've already said to ASME they will do around the issues that have been raised over the last month.
Okay, thank you so much. Seeing that there are no more questions, Mr. General Counsel, is there need to go into executive session?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, there is. There is a need to discuss student matters as well as litigation.
All right. Can I get a motion to enter into executive session to discuss matters involving student discipline and litigation? It's been properly moved by Ishay Collins, seconded by Cynthia Briscoe Brown. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. We will now enter into executive session. Thank you. All right. So thank you to our community members for taking the time to speak with us this evening. We always appreciate your feedback, and we will now move into the legislative portion of the meeting. As always, I want to thank everyone who is joining us for the board meeting here tonight, whether you are in the auditorium or watching us on live stream. It is greatly appreciated that you are engaged with Atlanta Public Schools and this board and leadership team as we work to ensure that every child in our system graduates college and career ready. I should note that this is our last regularly scheduled board meeting before this year's graduation ceremonies. After meeting, no, it's not the last scheduled at all this year, but no, the last before graduation ceremonies. After meeting and celebrating our 2019 graduating valedictorians, salutatorians, and STAR students just last month, and anticipating graduation in a few weeks, I cannot help but to be overwhelmed with a sense of pride in the academic achievements of all of our students. I will talk more about our efforts to recognize some of those students shortly. But at this time, I want to thank my colleagues on the Atlanta Board of Education, Superintendent Dr. Maria Kostarfin, and all of the staff and faculty here in APS for the continued commitment to the work of preparing all of our students for success. Before I ask Dr. Kostarfin to provide her official remarks, I wanted to share a few announcements of my own. First and foremost, I want to make certain that everyone knows that this week is National Teacher Appreciation Week, which runs from today, March 6th, through Friday, May 10th. We really cannot say enough about the importance of our teachers who arrive in our classrooms every single day, educating and preparing our children for their futures. It is often said that after a child's parent, no one is more instrumental in their development than a teacher. In APS, our thousands of teachers take that sense of purpose very seriously. I am pleased that we got off to a jump start this weekend in thanking our teachers with the inaugural APS Rocks and Runs 5K and Fun Run held on this past Saturday at Brown Middle School. A few of us up here ran, and a few of y'all in the crowd also ran. Congratulations to Dr. Christarfin and the team who planned and executed an amazing event. And I hope we thank all of our teachers this week and every week for all that they do to deliver for our children. If there are any teachers out in the crowd today, please stand up to be recognized. Any teachers? Thanks again for all that you do, and thanks for staying in there for our students. Next week, from May 13th through May 17th, is National Charter School Week. The week focuses on the contributions of charter schools to the education of our children. In Georgia, charter schools are public schools governed by nonprofit boards and operate through a performance-based contract with the state or local districts. As one of the most diverse urban school districts in the country, we provide our families and communities with a vast portfolio of options for the education of our children, and charter schools offer some of those options. The Atlanta Board of Education approved the district's first charter school back in 1999. There are now 18 charter schools operating in the district, and if there are any representatives from our charter schools still on the crowd, please stand up to be recognized for the work that y'all do on behalf of about 20% of our district's students. I did that to Dave Allen on purpose because I knew he was the only one out there. Shout out to the Executive Director of Innovation here in Atlanta Public Schools, Matt Underwood, for his leadership in partnering with our charter schools. The theme for this year's week is, quote, charter schools are, end quote, which speaks to the uniqueness of each charter school and how they serve students and families. So we celebrate our charter schools and education partners as they are on board with our mission to educate every child ready for college and career. Next, since 1949, May has been designated as National Mental Health Awareness Month, and it's a time when we elevate the discussion about mental health conditions. Mental Health America continues to use the theme #4Mind, 4Body, calling for everyone to pay attention to both their mental health as well as their physical health. This year, the group takes #4Mind, 4Body to another level as they explore the topics of animal companionship, including pets and support animals, spirituality, humor, work-life balance, and recreation and social connections as ways to boost mental health and general wellness. On May 8th, we celebrate our nurses. May 8th is National School Nurse Day, and I know I speak for all of us here in honoring and recognizing the contributions that our nurses make to student health and learning every day. Our students are advocates, our school nurses are advocates for student health and safety. Students with chronic and acute health conditions can have their health needs met at our schools because of our nurses. And our nurses understand emergency signs and symptoms and know when and how to get help. Thank you to our nurses for helping our students remain healthy and ready to learn each and every day in our schools. Do we have any nurses out in the audience? Yes. All right. Thank you so much for your service to our students each and every day. I think you're at Peyton Forest, right? Oh, okay. You're sitting in the crowd. I was thinking Peyton Forest, but thank you for your service. Earlier, when I mentioned our efforts to recognize student achievement, I was talking specifically about the annual special board meeting for APS student recognitions. For the 5th year running, this board will hold a special meeting to recognize the great achievements of our students that were made over the last school year. We invite everyone in the APS community to join us at 6:30 p.m. on Monday, May 13th, next week, right here in this auditorium. We will celebrate the work of many hundreds of students in what has truly become an annual tradition for this district. Please join us. Finally, last but not least, I am pleased to recognize the 50th anniversary of Peyton Forest Elementary School, which has been educating elementary students in Southwest Atlanta since the 1968-1969 school year. Peyton Forest is part of the Mays Cluster. Principal Cynthia Gunner and the entire Peyton Forest community like to call their school the greatest school on earth. They certainly started the school year in such fashion as they created an actual big top event on day one. When you walked through the school, which I think I was with Cynthia and the superintendent and maybe a couple others, when you walked through the school, you came upon a circus-themed school building complete with a ringmaster, magicians, animal tamers, carnival games, and clowns on stilts. They started the year as a beat the odds school, meaning that Peyton Forest performs higher than similar schools across the state. I now invite the board member for Peyton Forest, Erica Mitchell, to give a couple words.
Well, congratulations on your 50th anniversary. It's such an honor to serve two schools that are celebrating the 50th anniversary here in Atlanta Public Schools. Under the leadership of Principal Garner, congratulations, and I'll be back on May 20th for a special presentation for Peyton Forest Elementary School, and I look forward to continue my support in your efforts, and congratulations again.
So 50 years is quite the anniversary. We want to welcome Principal Gunner and the Peyton Forest community up for an official picture and I can't say celebration, but maybe celebration afterwards. But come on up for a picture and a reception for the board. I now invite Dr. Kastarfin to make her own remarks.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, everyone, members of the audience here, and those of you watching online. And of course, it's an exciting month. We are into the month of graduations, next to the beginning of the school year and doing principal selections. This is certainly the highlight of all of what we do. It's when we're living the mission to ensure our kids graduate ready for college and career. So May is an exciting time. I'll start off by thanking everyone who helped us kick off this past weekend our inaugural 5K APS Rocks and Runs. I want to shout out Rachel Sprecher, the head of our partnership office, and Michael Wilburn, who was the project organizer. It was amazing. It was a ton of work. We've been working on it. We were hoping to make this an opportunity for our teachers so that every year, the weekend before Teacher Appreciation Week, we could kick off with a run. And we were so grateful for the around 1,000 participants, people running, people raising money, people who were volunteers, cleaning up trash, setting up things. But basically, we raised almost $15,000 to be able to support our teachers during Teacher Appreciation Week. So the superintendent's teacher advisory group selected and advised on what teachers wanted. So I'm excited about that happening this week as well. But it was incredible to see our families there too with the kids. They got to do a fun run around the track, and if you've seen the pictures in social media and on my blog, you'll just see how adorable they were. They were so excited to have their own special run. But I also just want to thank Principal Crooms of Brown Middle School. They were so professional, so wonderful. I'd like to thank the Beltline, Atlanta Track Club, all of our partners who made it possible. We even had an Olympic hurdler, Mikhail Thomas, who came to warm up the group. So we attracted some pretty amazing people in addition to our students and staff and families. I wanted to thank the chair and the vice chair who one almost won it. The other one was almost in last place. But between the two of you, you provided the perfect bookends for the event. But it was a great time for everyone, and I'm so pleased that we were able to kick this off and make it an annual event that will help us support our teachers forever. My next section for comments is about the work session. The work session is where we talk about issues before the board takes a vote. We had 3 important presentations. Sky Duckett, the Chief Human Resources Officer, gave us an update on the talent management strategy. She basically showed how APS is setting a high bar for excellent teaching and where we've been able to make progress in those areas and areas where we want to continue to improve. Then we also, and in those categories, she talked about the common vision, teacher recruitment and hiring, onboarding teachers and leaders and other support staff so we have a strong start, individualizing the teacher and leader professional development, and retaining our top performers and keeping a structure in place so that we can develop future leaders and have a pathway within APS. And then we heard from Larry Hoskins, the Chief Operating Officer, about the proposed SPLOST 2017 budget amendment. With the current SPLOST, we expect to receive about $546 million in proceeds over the next 5 years. And this board actually has approved a series of capital improvements related to that. Remember, for SPLOST, you cannot spend the money in the general fund. It has to be used for bricks and mortar, these capital projects. But the construction costs are increasing due to materials rising. We've had an increase in steel prices because of tariffs from the federal level, and we also have a lot of growth in Atlanta. So competing for construction and having the ability to afford within that growth has been a challenge for us. But it is on the agenda tonight for the board to take action in those adjustments so we can complete all the projects that we have, all the immediate projects we have on the table today. And then finally, our Chief Financial Officer, Lisa Bracken, provided us with the fiscal year 2019 monthly financial update, the quarterly student activity fund presentation, and then the presentation of the tentative adoption for fiscal year 2020 budget. But before I get into that, I wanted to tell you that we were joined by our consultant, David Keene, who provided us with an update on the district's commitment to address our disparities in awarding contracts to minority and women-owned businesses. I wanted to thank Elisa Morningstar and all of the team in procurement for doing such a great job of taking those recommendations and putting them in place so we can have real-time improvements even within this school year. So congratulations to that team. But going back a little bit to the fiscal year 2020 budget adoption, our CFO presented to us the highlights of what's inside that budget. So during the discussion and action portion of the agenda, we will present to the board that tentative adoption. It represents what is basically an entire school year, but months of work on behalf of the Budget Commission and the full board. I want to shout out the chair of the Budget Commission, Nancy Meister, sitting here to my left. You can put the camera on her for a second, who painstakingly reviewed multiple presentations and gave us lots of great feedback along the way so that we could present the best options to the board leading up to the board's final approval, which will be on the agenda for June 3rd. The tentative budget is based on conservative growth in the digest with total revenue growth at about 4%. We still, as of today, do not have digest information from the Fulton County tax assessors. We had hoped for that information earlier this year, but their goal of an earlier assessment was not met. We have also discussed the issue that the increase in our state QBE funding is not enough to cover the full cost of what the governor has proposed of passing on a $3,000 raise to all of our teachers and other non-teaching staff. Part of that challenge I'm going to talk about, because since January, we have planned on offsetting the lack of state funding for those raises through the recurring funds promised in our Tax Allocation District Intergovernmental Agreement, or IGA, negotiated and settled with the City of Atlanta back in January. However, do I have a signature? Do I have a signature? Okay, I'm going to keep, okay. However, since we are still awaiting the first payment, a $10 million one-time payment that was negotiated with the city back in January in relation to the intervention on the bonds related to the West Side TAD, we cannot pass on the full amount of the raises until the revenue funding source is more secure. Furthermore, we have not been able to begin the implementation of what we need in the recurring $13 million, which is also part of that settlement as it relates to the East Side TAD. The city also has to set up a standing payment directive, which we thought we'd be working on the last few months, but we haven't been able to because we're still trying to get the first $10 million. Now, I was at the 5K, and I ran the whole thing, and a lot of teachers were talking to me before, during the run, after the run, and I can't talk and run at the same time. So, but I heard you while I was huffing and puffing, and we talked before and after, and the message is clear. I know that some of our teachers are angry and upset that we cannot honor this, and I said in the work session, and I will say it again tonight, the board made it clear in the Budget Commission meeting and in all their work leading up to today, which is the tentative budget, and in June, the final budget, that they absolutely want to pay all that money, and that the money that comes from the Tax Allocation District settlement agreement of the IGA back in January was absolutely earmarked for supporting this raise. So it's not the board that doesn't support, it's not the administration that doesn't support, it's not the CFO, and I hear you that folks are upset and you want your raises, but we unfortunately have not been able to get the City of Atlanta to honor the agreement that we settled back in January on January 7th. They had 10 days to pay us the first payment, and we have not received it yet. So what we did do, which isn't what everybody wanted, but it is the second best option. It includes a $12 million in salary raises for all employees. The teachers and instructional support pay raises equal not $3,000, but closer to $2,000, which is about 3.3% on average. for a teacher, and about a $1,000 one-time payment for eligible employees who are off their steps. Now, non-teacher pay raises also will had to be reduced. It includes a step and a 1% increase for pay grades 111 through 124. That's about a 2.45% increase. A step only for pay grades above 125 is going to be 1.2%, and a $700 one-time payment for eligible employees off step. We'll also, so what we did do in this budget, which I think is important for a lot of other staff members, the board is still working on pay parity issues, and thank you for doing that consistently for 5 years. This time, we're increasing school resource officer holidays. We're adjusting the JROTC instructional work schedule, and we're supporting some position reclassifications. So again, this isn't what everybody wanted, but it was the best we could do without having all the money in our revenue that we are owed to be able to do the budget that our teachers and our staff deserves. Now, we intend, though, and have already started working with legal and our CFO and our Human Resources Department to try to figure out how, if we're able to secure the additional revenue that is owed to us, how we would be able to set up a payment structure that would let us retroactively get that money to our staff. That is going to require, you know how that is, a lot of, new models and stuff so that the money goes out right and people aren't underpaid or overpaid or not paid. So that's a bunch of additional work we'll have to do, but this administration is absolutely committed to doing that. It's my understanding that the board also supports that. So we'll have to figure it out, but we stand with you and we are committed to getting that money to you as soon as possible when the city finally gives us what we are owed in our settlement agreement. In this budget, we continue to meet our obligations for pension and the rising TRS costs. More money than ever has been pushed directly to schools through our student success funding, including an additional $2.5 million for textbooks. This year, $420 million of the $851 million before you is directly in the traditional school budgets. On top of that, $135 million is contractually dedicated to charter schools and $44 million as a pass-through for those partnership schools that are working with us to provide services in our turnaround model. This shows a concerted effort of not only the administration, but the board in making sure that schools, Go Teams, and principals are the ones who are getting more control of the limited resources they have and can make decisions in the best interest of the students they serve on the front line every day. Now, once the flow-through dollars, funding spent centrally essentially directly on school efforts is taken into account, central office accounts for less than 10% of the tentative budget, meaning that funding is spent more directly on students and has reduced every year compared to the previous year. Now, between now and the final adoption, you know what we're looking for. We want to have final revenue projections with the sending of the property notices. I told you they're delayed. We also will have more accurate forecasts for the charter and partner school budgets once the fiscal year 2020 QBE sheets have been released by the state. And our last hope is that the city of Atlanta pays us the money owed to us in our settlement agreement from back in January so we can get the first $10 million and start working on the other piece to get the recurring money so that our salary increases can be supported for the out years that we will have to owe our teachers in paying it. We will address all of these adjustments, or as many as we can, at the May 16th Budget Commission meeting. So hopefully we'll have more answers by then, but if not, we'll be running up on the last board meeting of the year, which is in June. The public has more opportunities ahead to learn and speak about the budget. The board has scheduled another public hearing for fiscal year 2020. We had one tonight. At 6 p.m. Monday, June 3rd at the Alonzo A. Krim Center for Learning and Leadership. The district will also host 4 community meetings, all at 6 p.m. Thursday, May 9th at Inman Middle School. Monday, May 13th at Benteen Elementary School. Thursday, May 16th at E. Rivers Elementary School. And Monday, May 20th at Best Academy. I also wanted to shout out 2 key staff members who also deserve their full raises. The first one is the National Social Worker of the Year, Dr. Carolyn Rivers Cannon. At this part of the meeting, I am pleased to celebrate and recognize this person who is living our mission every day. She is getting this accolade for her amazing work. First, I wanted everyone to know that one of our devoted social workers was recently named by the School Social Workers Association of America as the 2019 National School Social Worker of the Year. Dr. Rivers Cannon has served in our district since 2009, but she has worked on her profession for nearly 2 decades. Presently, she serves students at both Booker T. Washington and Pickett Elementary School. She is the current president of the Georgia chapter of the association and a board member of the National Association. She has an extensive background in medical social work, juvenile justice, and school social work. She understands all the complicated layers of the challenges facing many of our students today. She uses her own experience as a teen mom to relate to our students. And we're so honored to have a colleague, Dr. Rivers Cannon. So could you please join us up here so we can give you some shine and love and hugs that you deserve. Welcome, Dr. Rivers Cannon. Oh, y'all can stay right there. If the board wants to start there, we got one more. Okay, so we have one more. I am now pleased to announce another great honor over at Burgess Peterson Academy, home of our Teacher of the Year, Tracy Penley, for APS. That's how you'll remember her. In November, she won the district's Excellence in Teaching Award, our equivalent of Teacher of the Year. She taught 4th graders at Burgess Peterson for the last 4 years. She began teaching because she loves the power of education to create a choiceful life for students. And she's deeply committed to educational equity for kids. She mentors, serves as a cooperating teacher with CREATE. She created a 4-H club. She has the Rock Eagle Project of Achievement, Clover Leaf Camp, and so many other things. And she's just adorable. Just last month, she was named as a top 10 finalist for the 2020 Georgia Teacher of the Year. So keep your fingers crossed as we learn who that person will be on May 18th. Tracy Penley and your principal, David White. Can you please come down and get some shining love and hugs from the board as well? David White, please come too. Okay, so my last part of the presentation is about the 2019 graduation schedule. We're just a few weeks away from graduation. One of our 2 ceremonies will be held on Saturday, May 18th for Atlanta Classical Academy, their first graduating class of seniors, and Drew Charter School. Then we get into the rest of the ceremonies, which will start on Tuesday, May 21st through Friday, May 24th at the Georgia Tech McCamish Pavilion. So just remember, everybody has to hear me, we are not at the Georgia World Congress Center. Not at the Georgia World Congress Center. So this is going to be different, and I'm going to highlight some of the big reasons why. So it's a new venue for APS. It's not our fault that we weren't at the Georgia World Congress Center. They rented that thing out ages ago, so we had to go find a new place for it. And just to be clear, there are other districts around who also use the Georgia World Congress Center, and they have to do graduation after school is over, because it's so hard to find a place for graduations without the World Congress Center. So we were very lucky. I want to thank the former president, Bud Peterson, and the whole team at the pavilion that made it possible for APS to be at Georgia Tech. But it comes with some challenges. And, but all the details are on our website at www.atlantapublicschools.us/gradnation. All one word. Okay, so let me highlight a couple of things. Number one, there is a clear bag policy. Treat it like a concert, treat it like a sports event, because we don't control this facility. At our other place, everybody came, we didn't, it was all good. But it's not anymore. So guests of this pavilion must adhere to Georgia Tech's policies. Clear bag, it's got to be a small bag, no bigger than 4.5 by 6.5 inches. And then if you forget all that, I don't know what can happen to your purse, but they'll give you a clear bag at the valet area if you need it or need it to be available as a guest. But medical bags will be permitted. But I'm just telling you, ditch the big purse that's solid and all that. Just get rid of all that, treat it like a concert. Number two, the parking map. It's not going to be as easy as the Georgia World Congress Center, which was already a little complicated. So a detailed map is available for guests. You'll find it on our Grad Nation webpage. The map includes an area layout, deck pricing, shuttle service locations for Georgia Tech campus parking decks. Now we, number three, are going to try to help our families. There's going to be a shuttle bus for MARTA riders. They'll be located at the Midtown MARTA station, and the route will be released later at a later date. But I'm just saying, we're going to try to help with buses. If we have any money left over from our planning with graduation, we're really going to try to help our families get into some areas so we can bus them in and things of that sort. But you really need to make a plan for driving so you don't miss the graduation. Number four, security checkpoints. Upon arrival, guests are required to enter through security checkpoints. Outside food, beverage, definitely weapons, including those carried with a permit, are not permitted. So just please don't come starting stuff. Leave it all at home. Because it is just too much drama during graduation, and these are Georgia Tech rules. So APS cannot advocate on your behalf. If you do not follow their rules, you do not get to come in. In anticipation of heavy traffic, we encourage you to come 1 hour in advance of the respective ceremony. And for your convenience, the Ken Byers Tennis Complex will be the holding area for early arrivals. So if you've come to an APS graduation before in the Georgia World Congress Center, we had kind of like this big place in the back. You waited, people got up, and then you would come in. Now you have to wait at the tennis place, and then when everybody gets out, we're able to let the next wave of people come in, which brings me to my final one, which is number 5. We have to do quick turnarounds. We don't have as many days and stuff as we had before. It's tighter this year. We have more schools graduating. More kids graduating, which is a good thing, but it comes with us having to do the quick turnaround. So graduation speeches, including the superintendent's comments, everybody's stuff will be condensed. It won't be as long as the other things. We will also know that the performance piece, where because our kids were just so talented, they did a lot of songs and dance. We won't be able to do that as much either. So it's still going to be fun. We're going to make it really nice. It's going to be a beautiful venue, but it's going to be different to previous years, so please adjust your expectations accordingly. You may view and download the commencement schedule, rehearsal dates, clear bag policy, parking map, all at the official commencement website. Again, that's www.atlantapublicschools.us/gradnation. Please be sure to reference the website for updated information as we approach the commencement week. Should you have any questions regarding the week, we've set up an email address to help because some people will have specific questions. It's apsgradnation@atlanta.k12.ga.us. apsgradnation@atlanta.k12.ga.us. We look forward to seeing everyone at graduation. Congratulations to our seniors. It's going to be a fabulous ceremony in a beautiful place with some adjustments, but please bear with us. We appreciate your patience and understanding in advance. Mr. Estevez, Chair of the Board, that concludes my remarks for this evening.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kostarfin. One more quick announcement. Dr. Lovett, is she still here? Tika Lovett? On Wednesday, May 8th, the annual Special Olympics track and field event will be held at Lakewood Stadium from... It is from 8 p.m. to 2 p.m. Again, that's at Lakewood, and that is the Special Olympics track and field event. Sorry, 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. I thought that's what I said. 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. on May 8th, Wednesday, at Lakewood Stadium. We invite everyone to come out and look forward to your participation. All right, with that being said, Dr. Kostarfin, would you please present the consent agenda?
Yes, sir. Mr. Chair, members of the board, I'm pleased to submit consent agenda items 5.01 through 8.04, excuse me, for board approval. But first, I want to call your attention to one of the items you discussed in the work session and followed up with all of your questions, which is consent agenda item 7.01, which would be the approval of the food management company for APS next year. And so to that agenda item, the administration is recommending Southwest Food Service Excellence, also known as SFE, as our food service vendor for the upcoming year, effective July 1, 2019. You'll recall, as I said in the work session, that we issued an RFP for food vendor services on November 6th and requested that we have the responses for those. We did the evaluation through our procurement process, and again, we have to serve 9.3 million meal equivalents per school year at a time. So it's very important that we not only maintain the financial stability of our food nutrition program, but that we also follow our procurement process and make a smooth transition for both our students and our staff, and that starts as soon as July 1 because we have summer programming and kids coming back for athletics, and they need the programs before the start of the school year. And we do know that SFE has indicated their willingness to be in alignment with an assumptions agreement with ASME Labor Association, and in that they talk about compensation, benefits, working conditions, and for part-time and full-time employees. It is my understanding that they have come to alignment on that, and if the board approves this contract, they will continue to work on a formal collective bargaining agreement. In addition to the day-to-day work of a food contract, they'll be investing in marketing and decor enhancements, increasing student participation, donations toward culinary scholarships for students, and other improved choices for foods, including healthy organic options for our kids. As part of our due diligence in contacting vendor references, We learned that there is a high retention rate with their K through 12 clients, which means that for us, we are looking forward to the same support and commitment to not just Atlanta Public Schools and our administration and our board, but to our employees and our students, so our students get great food and our employees are treated well. And understanding that they would be SFE's employees, but even within that, our labor association and their membership are like family to us as well, and we want them to have a good experience in their job, even if we're in partnership. As you know, we're still working as a district to improve our quality, healthy nutrition programs, and be in compliance with the board policy as well as state and federal laws. We want to promote a culture that's focused on enhancing our food service practice. Throughout this process, we answered questions for board members, employees, the the Labor Association, and any other issues that were raised throughout the last month. So we submit these consent agenda items and called out this one in particular because it is a large contract, but it is consent agenda items 5.01 through 8.04 for the board's approval.
Thank you so much, Dr. Christophin. Is there a motion to approve consent agenda items 5.01 through 8.04?
So moved.
Been properly moved by Cynthia Briscoe Brown, seconded by Nancy Meister. Please open the vote. Thank you. Moving on to 9.01, the FY 2020 tentative budget adoption, first reading. Can I get a motion to approve?
Second.
Been properly moved by Ishay Collins, seconded by Cynthia Briscoe Brown. Is there discussion? Okay, please open the vote. Thank you. Mr. General Counsel, is there need for the board to report out from executive session?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, there are two items. Request a motion in student disciplinary appeal number 2019-7 that the board uphold the hearing officer's decision in part and modify in part as stated in Exhibit A attached.
Thank you. Can I have a motion?
Second.
Been moved by Ishay Collins, seconded by Candace Wood Jackson. Please open vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next item is requesting a motion in student case number 20196 to uphold the decision of the hearing officer.
Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Been properly moved by Cynthia Briscoe Brown, seconded by Ishay Collins. Let's open up the vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. General Counsel. We will now move into board resolutions. First is 11.01, the National Mental Health Awareness Resolution. Can I get a motion? Been properly moved by Ishay Collins, seconded by Nancy Meister. Open the vote. Next is the National School Nurses Day Resolution. Can I get a motion? Been properly moved by Ishay Collins, seconded by Nancy Meister. Next is the National Teacher Appreciation Week Resolution, 11.03. It's been properly moved by Ishay Collins, seconded by Cynthia Briscoe Brown. Thank you. And before we move on into the report out from the community meeting, I wanted to take a moment to have a moment of silence. I forgot to do this at the beginning. We should have, but for Commissioner Emma Darnell, who passed away over the weekend. She was a Fulton County Commissioner, known for advocacy of vulnerable people or for vulnerable people over decades here in Atlanta and in the country. She focused on people of color and on seniors, and will be missed by many, both in the city and around the country. So please join me in a moment of silence for her. Thank you. I now invite Vice Chair Ishay Collins to report out from the community meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Tonight we had 17 speakers for tonight's community meeting. We heard in regards to issues at Mays High School and objection to the recommendation of the new principal. Community demanded for more seasoned leadership and to look at models nationally. We also heard on the other end of that Mays alumni and current faculty in support of the new principal selection and shared qualifications that made that individual qualified to take on that role. Community members expressed lack of diversity and issues with minority support at Inman Middle School and focused on efforts to improve that. Representatives from AFSCME showed support for the cafeteria workers as the board considered potential new food service vendor through its contract procurement services. We also heard from representatives from FPSE who congratulated APS on its first 5K run to benefit Teacher Appreciation Week and stood with the cafeteria workers from AFSCME. The vice president from Aramark focused on the progress it has made with this food service through APS over the course of the past few years. We heard from the Latino Parents Association that demanded more focus on equity and the need to be more inclusive of Latino parents and still show support for the System Excellent Schools framework. Clark Atlanta student also advocated for more inclusion of HBCU students and also supported the Excellent School framework. As we look at next year's budget, parents and community members continue to advocate for support of the Excellent School framework and ensuring that the budget reflects that. We heard from community members on the use of Bethune Elementary School to generate revenue for the Washington and Douglas cluster, and also focusing on the suspension and discipline of African American boys. Parent of Atlanta Classical Academy reminded us of National Charter School Week, which is next week, and their first graduation on next Saturday, May 18th at 11 a.m. Community members demanded fidelity in the Go Team selection process and membership, and questioned the fidelity of the current Go Team election process. We concluded the community meeting by celebrating Aquantis Clemens, 8th grader at Price Middle School, who placed 5th in the National High School Chess Championship. And we, in honor of Teacher Appreciation Week, we show appreciation to Marion Edwards, his 8th grade teacher who coaches the team at Price Middle School. That includes the comments from tonight's community meeting, Mr. Chair.
Thank you so much, Vice Chair Collins. We'll now have a report out from board committees. Let's start with budget. Nancy?
We met last month, and as you know, we're going through the hearings now, and hopefully to adopt the budget next month, and we're all under control.
Great. Thank you for your work with the Budget Commission. Next, policy. Cynthia?
I've had some great meetings with internal APS administration, and also have been collecting information from community members, including LAPS, which spoke earlier tonight, about our new language policy, and hope to present that to the Policy Review Committee meeting at our next meeting on May 16th at 8:30 in the morning, and have that before the board on first read at our June meeting.
Excellent. Thank you. Audit. Leslie?
Yep, we had an audit report around technology, and if folks are interested in any of that information at any point, they can get in touch with Connie Brown, our Executive Director of Internal Audit, who I believe will be doing a presentation in June at the board meeting, and we'll have another meeting this month. So,
Thank you so much. Are there any report out from conferences? I think that is it. I will now entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting. Been properly moved by Ishay Collins, seconded by Cynthia Briscoe Brown. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Meeting adjourned. Thank you so much.